First on the agenda will be the Zoning Board of Appeals agenda. Does anyone have anything to say on that? Does that stand? No. The update on 662 Adams Street. Get the right one. I've been there to the property. You have information on it in front of you. Obviously more than 150 feet of fill that's come in there of some sort. And we ended up sending a cease and desist letter to him. At that point, we realized that the zoning enforcement officer had already given them some notice, which they haven't really followed. And then I viewed the place again, and it was obvious there was more fill brought in addition to what he said originally in his letter, that he only brought in 220 yards. But obviously, there was a lot more brought in afterwards, after he said that. So that's where we stand on it right now. There's obviously a number of things. The site plan, the size of the lot. It's, are you all familiar with it? Are you all familiar with it, the property?
This is the property before Wayne's Mattresses?
Yes.
Okay, and out back, they've kind of cleared it out, and there's a bunch of stuff out back now?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's zoned, what do we zone it?
Industrial.
Is it still industrial?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the question is, I mean, he's got has a residence there, and he also has, so he's got to make up his mind what he wants to do, and he's got to, we sent him forms for the fill and also for site plan. I talked with him he answered the letter by phone on the weekend and left a message. And so I called him on Monday afternoon and talked with him. He sort of told me I didn't know what I was talking about on the fill, but in any case, I told him he needed to come in before the planning board, and he also needed to do with it. I didn't realize that they had given him a notice from the building department. So obviously, that's another issue. So we'll see.
Please proceed.
Please?
Please proceed as needed.
Thank you.
Please proceed as needed.
Right. We will. Anything else on that?
Can you do the covenant?
Oh, with covenant?
Just afraid of walking out.
Covenant for who?
Robin's out.
Robinson Ave. On Robinson Ave, there are some, I'm not quite sure. There were some problems with that as far as with those letters.
So the covenant is okay?
Yeah.
It's right here.
So the covenant is okay to
The
be
covenant is
signed?
okay. He's trying to get a building permit, and the planning board's going to need to determine if that road is away. And then opinion from council, and I'll send all of that to PMP.
Right, but PMP has said that it's not according to what was supposed
It
to.
is, he's going to do a final report, I think. He said it's about this, about that, he hasn't gone out to check. But that doesn't have anything to do with the release of the covenant, that's going to be a.
So we can do that, but he still can't get a building permit.
Mountain
So,
board makes it away,
all right.
which is not an issue.
So
Okay.
why do we need the covenant then?
Hmm?
Why do we need the covenant if,
He wants the covenant released for surety, which he's already put out. But he can't get a building permit until the board makes the road away, declares that it is an appropriate way for him to get.
is this the one we did before?
Yes.
Like a long time ago?
Yes. There's multiple issues. Robin's out, we'll get it here. And then Jeffrey, where Alex Bezanson improved it from here to here. I can't remember where it's too far back now. And Mr. Federico came in and did from here to here.
So I still don't understand why we need a surety if he can't get a building permit.
That's,
I don't-
His problem, I
He
guess.
wants to part with his money?
We've already got the surety.
All right.
So, someone want to make a motion to accept the surety of $25,000?
Which property is the covenant attached to?
The only lot the board, there's 2 lots he's trying. I think one of the lots that he's trying to get a permit on is a problem at this point is a non-conforming grandfather lot, which wasn't part of the board subdivision.
So we go down the end of the street, and at the very end, there's kind of a wooded area as the road starts to fade into the woods.
Off to the right there, I think it's the lot that the board permitted.
Okay,
years
so,
ago in
so,
the subdivision.
so he hasn't built anything yet on this
No.
lot?
No, and then there's a separate lot, it's on voting grandfather.
Right.
Don't take my word for that. But that's how this whole thing came up about the road.
Okay.
Is that road,
But
he was trying to get a building permit for that lot.
when we originally did that road extension was only for 1 lot, right?
It was-
And now all of a
No,
sudden,
you've done 2.
now he's got 2?
You've done 2 road extensions. I think Jeff Brady did one a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah,
And then Mr. Federico came in and did one.
right.
So there've been 2 road extensions.
Been so long. Trying to refresh my memory.
It was a long, long time
Yeah, it
ago on a
was.
land far away, yes.
Yeah, and I think Wheatley did a lot of the work.
Yes, he did. And I think you've got Carl Garvey, is he doing the work now? Yeah. So Carl's out there. So the building permit piece of this, where the board has to make it away, is coming your way as soon as we get all the i's dotted and the t's crossed. And you have something you can look at that makes sense. Because right now you just have an opinion from town council and nothing to go with it, so to speak.
Do we lose anything by giving up the covenant in favor of a surety? Okay. Separate question. Who's going to be responsible for upgrading the roadway?
He will be,
He will be.
He being,
the contractor.
I'm sorry?
The contractor, in this case, was it Federico?
That's the question. I don't know.
I mean, he could
Because-
I
sell-
think where you're going with that is because one person did one piece and he did a second
Exactly.
piece, right?
It's that, do we have multiple owners of the pieces that need to be upgraded?
We need to see the plans, and we haven't got the plans that are confirmed. They've got one set and another set, and the PMP has reviewed it and has problems with it.
Separate question, where'd the 25 grand figure come from?
PMP.
Okay.
So I guess, the question
I'll
is,
make that motion.
motion made, seconded? Seconded. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Can you sign that?
Oh, I'm gonna sign it. Really, I'm gonna place.
I know,
Right up here?
I'd say, yeah.
That one there?
Yep.
Right, being 6:05, public hearing, fill permit, Elm Street. Is something to read? Do I have something to read?
No.
The Abington Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, August 3, 2020, at 6:05 PM at Abington Town Hall, 500 Glenowitz Way, Abington, Mass., on the application of Michael Noonan, 63 Mulberry Drive, Abington, Mass. 02351, for approval to allow fill material to be brought to the site of 0 Elm Street, Abington, Mass. 02351, pursuant to Abington General Law Section 49-1. The property is located on 0 Helm Street, Abington, Mass. 02351, as shown on the Assessor's Map 64, lots 63, 64, and 65. The application will be on file at the Town Clerk's office during regular business hours. Wayne P. Smith, Chairman, advertised in the Rockland Enterprise, 7 and 14 days.
No, it didn't, it just went to the abutters. It
Oh, it
doesn't
just
have
had
to
to
be
be-
advertised for a
right,
film
yep.
permit.
It was just posted. Take that back. Mr. Noonan?
I do, thank you.
I have land on Helm Street, which I went in front of the conservation and got permission on a request for determination to take trees and stumps out. I have brought in about 240 yards already, which I'm entitled to by the bylaws of the town. And I'm going to request another 400 yards, which should be in excess of what I need, but as time goes on, settlement and compaction, I'll probably need some more. This will also include what I use as a top, it's asphalt grindings, which is a porous material, and that'll also be included in the 400 yards. It's just vacant land, and just want to make it level with the rest of my land. That's about it. There's photocopies and so forth in there if you need them, or if I have maps and so forth here in case you have to see what's going on.
Any questions from the board?
Elm Street is privately owned
Privately owned.
by,
Myself, Whitman Body Works, and 14, the little house out in the street.
okay.
I own most of it with the property they own, so, but that doesn't make any difference. The other two people have rights to it, but this is way back.
How deep does the roadway run? Now, according to this, is it basically all the way to the back property line?
The roadway stops at the back the roadway actually stops at the property that I'm talking about, because that's where it stops, and I actually own that part of the roadway now after the body shop because of the way the deed reads and entitlement with the, some law in town. So that's already been deeded. All my parcels are all one parcel now.
So, approximately how high is this raising the back end of the property?
About 15 feet. About 15 feet. And I've already, the 240 yards I've already brought in has done about half of it. So I'm asking for excess, so I don't have to come back in front of the town. I can always do the upkeep on it.
Okay. With the new stormwater management and stormwater runoff?
I'm not even close. I'm beyond the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah, I thought it extended to more projects than just the 100-foot buffer.
That'd be news to me, I don't know.
Does any of the board members have any idea about whether this gets into play here? Because we're talking a 15-foot drop-off heading towards a,
The town hasn't adopted it yet.
okay,
That was up for this town meeting.
okay. What's the property going to be used for, once raised?
Open storage for right now. I've had thoughts about other things, but whether I have the ambition of the fight, I don't know. But
Is that in the general spot where you're gonna put that arena way back
Say
when?
that again?
Is that in the general spot where you're gonna put that arena way back when?
that was, yeah, well,
Yeah,
we won't, let's not talk about
all
that.
right. But it's that general area?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any grading out from the back of it, any sort of materials holding it in so it doesn't just run off and
It's
leach
just,
out?
it's gonna be just natural material, mostly, loam, tailings and so forth, so it's natural, what's come out of the ground is going back into the ground.
No, that's fine, it's just, we have some rules about grading in terms of the decline, that if it gets to be a certain steepness,
I'm gonna try to keep it as level, but with a grade, so it, you know, it'll have a runoff, so it doesn't hold any water.
okay.
You know, it'll be following one grade to a certain extent on one part of it. The other part of it is drops down, so I'm just trying to make it level so it can be used.
Right, no, I understand that, but it's, if it goes flat and then all of a sudden it's just a strut, a straight drop off the back end of it, I think we have some rules in our bylaws about
I have no idea anything about those.
word. I mean, I can pull it up if you have a minute, but, I mean, that's when we start to get into needing some riprap to hold it in place and,
I can do that. That's, matter of fact, the tailings are basically riprap.
yeah.
So that will do it on its own.
Sure.
That's why I'm kind of using tailings, even though I know we're gonna have some compaction, and settlement, it'll just all bind together.
Okay.
I say 450 yards isn't a whole lot of material.
Huh?
It's not really a whole lot of material.
No, it's not.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the public? Yes.
Robert Graham, 43 Vineyard Road, Abington. You said 400-something yards. How many truckloads is that?
I have no idea, I don't know what kind of trucks are gonna bring it in.
What if it was like a small 18-wheeler?
What?
What if it was a small 18-wheeler truck, dump truck?
I don't know, what's that, 30?
Well, it depends. It depends on the weight of the material, depends on what they're gonna load. You know, a trailer dump can hold up to 28 yards, but they won't because of the weight. Might be 20 yards for a trailer dump. A 10-wheeler, you know, maybe 12, 14 yards. But unless I get permission, I don't, you know, I mean, I can tell you what they can hold, I don't know what they're gonna hold.
Somewhere around 30 yards for a trailer dump. Thereabouts.
Yeah, it depends on the weight, you
Yeah,
know.
yep, just for,
Somewhere between 15 and 20 trucks you're gonna need.
That's what I was trying to
Yeah,
figure out.
yeah, somewhat, yeah, I would, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Question?
Yes. Hi. William Creighton, 53 Vineyard Road. I wrote a letter. Should I submit it to you, or?
Did we get a letter?
No, I have it here.
Oh.
I don't know if I can approach you with the
Yes,
COVID stuff.
Approach the mic.
Yep.
Oh, you want to give us a letter?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This letter has all the enclosures.
Yeah.
It's just a short version of the same letter. So I'm William Creighton, 53 Vineyard Road. I live on the other side of the property Mr. Noonan owns. I can tell you on April 23rd, I witnessed over 18 truckloads of fill being brought into the property. That's before I started really counting them. So I believe you've hit over the 250 cubic yards of fill, which requires the application from this board, which has,
How do you know how many yards are on the truck?
I addressed the board?
Yeah, well, you can answer the questions afterwards. Yes, go ahead.
Right, just address the board, right? Well, if you look at some research, there's about 15 yards per these trucks that came in, which brings it over the 250 yards, which requires the application from this board. Just earlier tonight, you issued a cease and desist to a property on Adams Street at over 250 yards. So I'm asking you to do the same with this property, or to cease and desist until it can be proven how many yards of fill was brought into the property. Because I believe it's over the 250, which requires action from this board. Plus, like you heard tonight, he wants to bring another 400 cubic yards in, which brings in 15 feet of fill in portions of the property. Back portion of the property is in the FEMA flood zone 100-year floodplain. Putting dirt into that property requires compensatory storage, stormwater management to address the additional storm flow. The attached FEMA floodplain map, which I've given to you, so the Massachusetts Oliver GIS system demonstrate the majority of the property that is going to put this 15 feet of fill is in the FEMA flood zone. So how is this flood storage being addressed? There's nothing in the application that talks about that. Where is this fill coming from? Is it certified that it's not hazardous waste fill from some hazardous waste property? There's nothing that proves what kind of clean fill this is. So the application doesn't really submit all these questions we have. He did go to the Conservation Committee. I believe it was January, possibly February this year. But he did say he was just going to bring in some fill to fill in some areas where the stumps had been removed. Well, over 18 truckloads is not really that. So how are we going to address the FEMA flood zone is considered the wetland? We'll put 15 feet of fill in it, as already told to you earlier today. So I'm asking you to please issue a cease and desist, ask for some engineering calculations and how the floodplain, the FEMA floodplain issues are addressed before this 15 feet of additional fill. Like I said, I believe there's already over 250 cubic yards, and I'm sure Mr. Noonan could bring in some truck slips that would prove otherwise if he still has that opinion. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Noonan, how many truckloads have come in so far?
The trucks that came in with 10-wheelers are about 12 yards per load because of the weight. And we stopped it at about 230 because I knew that I was going to have people watching me. And I spread that, and I have a Bobcat with a 40-yard bucket. I was able to spread it in 2 days. So if there was any more than that, the Bobcat would take a week to sprint to it, and, you know, any more than that. That's number one. Number two, it's tailings. The tailings are coming from loam that's being graded, screened over on Adams Street, behind Richard Pierce's place. So it's just loam tailings. It's not hazardous material. It's nothing. It's loam tailings, and the reason I'm using that is for the settlement and for the exact same reason I just stated, so it would hold. There's going to be no runoff. And that's the other reason I'm using an asphalt porous material on top of it, so that it will hold. I do this for a living.
Any other questions from the members here, the public? The board has some more questions?
I would say that I think normally we do insist that the fill brought in is clean.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't want, it's my land. I don't want to ruin it in case I ever want to do something later on and you dig down and you find something.
I guess my question would be, fill in a floodplain? I mean, gentlemen,
It's, again, I went through, oh, I'm sorry.
the gentleman that's writing the letter has documented that most of this is in the floodplain. I'm sure there are regulations about filling in the floodplain. You want to talk about this?
Well, I went in front of the conservation and with a request for determination with the being out of the 100-foot buffer, and I was given permission to do this, so that's the board.
I mean, I would have a concern, but if Concom said it was okay,
Mm-hmm.
So the 400 yards are 400 plus another 220 that have already been brought in? So it's a total of 6.
400 is going to be in excess. That's so I can also
No, but
maintain the property as time goes on.
I understand that, but I just want to clarify the
Yes.
fact. It's 400 yards plus 220 or 30 that's already been brought
Yes.
in. So it's a total of 630
Yes.
yards.
I don't have the conservation letter where that is. You guys copy that?
If you only have one copy, I can read it. Thank you. The WPA Form 2, determination of applicability, I can't even say it, applicability. And it's Michael Noonan. And remove trees outside the 100-foot buffer as shown on the plan on Helm Street. And the area described in the request is not an area subject to protection under the act of the buffer zone. plan delivered February 25th, 2020. And it's signed by 4 of the members of the Conservation Commission.
And,
Can you send me a copy of that? Thank you.
It's right on the file.
and just to close the loop on this, Concom is aware that that's a 100-year floodplain?
Yes.
And do they know the volume of the fill that you're bringing in?
That was never discussed at the time because I didn't know really how much I was gonna need, excuse me, how much I was gonna need or what it was gonna look like after the stumps were gone.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I was at that conservation meeting.
You can use the mic.
I was at that conversation meeting, and the quantity of fill was brought up, and like I said earlier, he said he was just going to bring fill in to fill in depressions from stump removal. Yes, the buffer, the flood we just talked about was on there, but the FEMA floodplain topic was not brought up at the meeting. So I'm going to go back to the Conservation Committee and alert them that we did not see this until just recently about the FEMA floodplain, where a lot of the property is in the FEMA floodplain. Because we're talking about so much fill, 15 feet, an additional 400 cubic yards, I would ask that you please postpone this, wait for the Conservation Committee to rehear this on the new information about the FEMA floodplain. Because once you put 650 cubic yards there now, you're not going to remove it. And it's going to adjust change the floodplain area, and there's no compensatory storage or anything like that. So I am going back to the Conservation Committee with this new information that we just found out ourselves.
What literally read to me from that contract, that was a very small side project. They qualified as being out, the area that he was looking at was outside the floodplain.
That's
But
correct.
this is, it extends into the floodplain. The work, sounds like they described was small stuff, just stuff we were filling it in, and it was happening outside the floodplain. But this is now going to, this is, the fill, it doesn't talk about raising grades or adding fill, it doesn't talk about what happened. It kept out of all the other information by just saying that it was outside the floodplain, that they understood it to be. But I don't know what they, didn't see a plan back then, and that they didn't, it sounds like, basically, what is there today does not sound like anything they described. They described, sounds like a shovel and a couple of bucket loads of fill, and this was much larger enterprise, with figuring it, leveling it off, bringing up the grade, and, you know, I could be concerned. My problem that I have with floodplains is that the reason they're there, the reason they're marked off, is that if you put something in it, you displace that much water. So if you if this fill goes up there, whatever water it would have absorbed is displaced by all that water, is displaced by all that land that came in to fill it. So the people beside you, well, the floodplain is shallow further, water will go higher than the land would be on the side.
Right, but that's why they have the 100-foot buffer. That's on a conservation issue. If you're outside the 100-foot buffer, that's why you don't have to go and have engineering and so forth done, as far as I know and so forth. And, you know, when I say 15 feet, it might only be 8 feet. I am going beyond everything that's going to be needed because I really don't want to have to come back in front of the board and so forth. I just want to get permission to use my land, which I'm entitled to do. And like I said, I'm getting older and I don't have the fight in me anymore to keep fighting the boards and so forth and neighbors. So if you say no, you'll never see me again.
I'm willing to do this, that I'll vote to approve a permit that is in effect as long as there's a conservation permit
Okay.
in effect. If conservation decides to go back and revisit it, then our permit is paused as well.
And conservation can always ask them to remove it if it's in the floodplain wetlands.
Right, so I mean, I'll trust that Concom did their homework and did their due diligence. I'll trust my fellow boards members.
That's why I went in front of them.
If Concom decides that we would rather take a second look at this and have some questions, then that would pause our fill permit as well,
Okay.
if that's okay.
So, but if you give me the fill permit, I can fill it in, and then if there's any other determinations, then we'll just go from there? Is that what you're saying?
Does that make sense to the board?
Sounds like you're waiting for it to go through the Conservation Commission.
No, I'm saying if the abutter wants to bring it back to Concom, and Concom chooses to reopen the matter, then, that would affect the
He'd
standing.
have to remove the fill.
What?
Because he would have to remove the fill,
Yeah.
even if we've given him permission.
Thinking if this was a residential owner moving here, there'd be no doubt in my mind that I'd want to see plans showing grades and how the grades impact all the land around it. And that's the whole reason for the fill bylaws and so much.
Well, and the other,
On it, about how it affects the grading.
the other thing, after the fact, if all of a sudden the water is going onto someone else's property, they have the right to come back before us and have it corrected. Just like they did, on Route 139. Where they brought fill in.
Ac-
392 Randolph Street, the subdivision.
Never came back and finished it.
But he came in with an engineered plan.
Actually, the way this is set up, is you come into the property, on the left is higher ground than my property, and the rest of it is all my property, which I'm swaling, just for that reason. I don't want to, again, if it becomes such a fight again, I'll just be done with it. I just don't have it anymore.
It's not a tremendous amount of fill, but that's another whole issue. I mean, if
No,
some,
I was
I'm-
just thinking about what the grading and filling in of area that I can't really tell where it's going to 100-foot buffer zone is just on this drawing.
Yeah, that line is the 100-foot buffer, that squiggly line there, yes.
That is it, oh, that's not
Yep.
the river? That's not the.
And so I'm not even on the 100-foot buffer.
It's not on the 100-foot buffer, but he's within the 100-year floodplain.
And this is the one that hasn't been taken yet, this is the one that I voted.
so a motion's been made.
This FEMA
Yeah,
map, Joe, this is the one that hasn't been accepted yet.
Lease?
This has not been accepted.
Right, that's correct. And
It's a lot easier if we had a town meeting than the FEMA map has been accepted. That's what we have to deal with.
well, not only that, but we know the problems with FEMA maps. Bob can attest to that, I'm sure.
Yep.
They change so often.
They change them all the time. They don't really,
I'll second that
another
motion.
whole issue.
Second, the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Oh, wait a minute, before I do that, we'll close, it's not a public, we have to close the hearing. All right, motion been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
One opposed.
Are you both opposed?
Yes.
You said no? You said no too?
Oh, two opposed? Two opposed.
2 opposed, 2 for, plus whatever the chairman votes.
I'll vote for it. Fine, thank you. Yes, sir. Yes.
This is very difficult to hear. What was the motion that was passed?
The motion passed was that we allow him to bring in 400 yards of additional fill,
Providing,
provided that the conservation has no problem with it, Conservation Commission, which they,
Can you bring in Phil before?
if he brings in more fill, if he fills in wetlands, the Conservation Commission will have them remove it. If it's within the 100-foot, that's the motion. That's what'll happen.
if you go to Conservation Commission and you convince them to reopen their vote, and reconsider, that nullifies our permit here. You understand?
So they, I'm sorry, it's just very difficult here. So if they decide to reopen the hearing, that nullifies what you just did now.
Yeah, so if our fill permit is only valid so long as he has conservation approval. If conservation revokes their approval, then our permit is revoked as well. We're trusting that Concom looked at the facts and determined that it was okay. We're not overruling what they determined. If you convince them to change their mind, then that effectively will revoke our permit as well.
All right, we're all set with that. Thank you all. At 6:10, public hearing, special permit, application, floodplain and wetland protection district, outdoor storage of materials, transport vehicles, and public hearing, site plan review, 940 Hancock Street, continued.
Did you call it the order, Mr. Scott?
I'm going to read anything on that one, do I? I don't think I read anything again. It's just a continuation. I don't have to read anything.
No, it's a continuation.
Can I ask what your parameters are? Should keep the masks on at all times?
What did the Board of Health say? You can't talk with the mask
Have to have the
on?
masks on.
What?
Have to have the masks on.
Have to have the mask
Keep your
on,
masks on, that's fine, I prefer it that way, that's great. And whoever's speaking should approach the microphone?
please.
So I'm just going to ask them to leave the building.
Yeah,
Have to fight outside.
right.
Do you prefer where the display boards go?
If there's anyone in that wants to see it from here, then it should, so that they can all see it.
Who's here for 940 Hancock Street? Anyone? This gentleman, you're all set? So this gentleman would like a view in the board itself. We all set?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just to reintroduce, my name is Attorney Sean Riley, 500 Washington Street in Abington, representing Hancock Abington LLC, the applicant, and the owner of the property at 940 Hancock Street. As the board's aware, this is a continued hearing. All of your hearings, well, not all of your hearings, some of the hearings are continued. This application was originally filed in November of 2019. Our first hearing was held in December of 2019. Then there was some continuances and some,
Can you have him move that, because somebody can sit there
someone can sit there?
in the back?
Move it backward?
No, not that chair, the one behind him.
Oh, so someone can.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a pain, but when we hit capacity,
You got it,
I'm not going to be on Marty's hit list tomorrow. Just saying.
sure. So just procedurally, the site plan application and the special permit applications have been through the board since December. During the time of the COVID continuances, our engineers from Kelly Engineering and the town's engineers from Norwood Engineering have continued to work on the project and resolve any outstanding questions. I know that the town's engineer has submitted their final review letter dated May 15th, which we'll touch on in just a few minutes. Let me first introduce and reintroduce the gentlemen who are here with me tonight. Right in the middle here is Mr. Garrett Horseman from Kelly Engineering Group of Braintree. To the rear is Robert Michaud from MDM Transportation Consultants. And this gentleman here, the good-looking guy, is Michael Sheehan, who's representing the owner applicant. And all of those gentlemen will be available to you for any questions. So pending before you is the continued hearing for the site plan approval and for the special permit to construct within the floodplain overlay district and the special permits under 175-21H 2 and 5 to allow open lot storage of commercial materials and commercial vehicles. This property, again, was purchased in 2013 by the current owners, and they filed their proposal in 2019. Mr. Sheehan will talk more about, remind you again what we're proposing, but essentially it is 6 small commercial warehouse-style buildings, storage buildings, on a 28-acre site. The existing driveway that comes off of Hancock Street will be the driveway, and if you recall, the fire department had some great input, which we've incorporated into our plans. One was they asked us to add a hydrant as far out into the site as possible, so that they could use it for any forest fires out in that area. The other one was at the entrance, instead of having an island to separate the inbound outbound lane, was to have more of a scored concrete so that you could drive a truck over it if you wanted to or needed to. There were some comments made by the town's engineer, some suggested revisions and improvements which have been incorporated, and if I can just, reading off of his letter, dated May 15, 2020, site design, all items in the initial review have been adequately addressed. Traffic, all items in the initial review have been adequately addressed. Stormwater design, all items in the initial review have been adequately addressed. Utilities, the same, adequately addressed. Grading, adequately addressed. And for landscaping, lighting, and architecture, he commented the planning board should determine the proposed architecture is acceptable for this type of development and layout given the design intent of section 17539B, meaning that's the part that says for street view that we should have New England style architecture, and our proposal was, since this is, the closest building is 350 feet away from the street, basically these buildings would not be in view of any passersby. The applicant is also filing these plans with the Conservation Commission to obtain an order of conditions. And as your engineer has suggested, and as we would be required to do, if the Conservation Commission has any required revisions to the site plan, we would submit those revisions to your board. And this board would usually, if it was a minor revision, would take an affirmative action to just document the revision for the record. If it was a significant revision, which we do not expect, then we would have to have another hearing to address those. But that remains to be seen. That hearing, I believe, has not yet been scheduled yet. No. We also go into the zoning board this Thursday night for their continued hearing. The only zoning relief is a variance for the frontage. The piece of frontage that we're entering on the property on Hancock Street is in its original condition since 1955. Has 98 feet of frontage right now. So again, given the delay, the engineers have tried to use the time to try to improve it, tweak it, and finalize the plans. The finalized plans have been submitted, and as I just recited, have been reviewed by your engineer. I would, if we could just if I could present a summary, ask our traffic engineer to kind of give a quick summary of what was brought up and mentioned back in December. And Mr. Sheehan can also kind of remind you or fill you in about what they intend to build and how they intend to use the property. So if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Michaud.
Thank you. For the record, Robert Michaud, I'm a principal with MDM Transportation Consultants based in Marlborough, Massachusetts. We've submitted to the board a technical memorandum dated to February 2019 that outlines the results of a traffic impact statement that we've prepared based on information that was collected pre-COVID, of course. And what it does is it estimates the amount of additional trip activity for this particular property. We know that the estimates as they've been presented in here are based on industry standards, but in reality, a known operator with known characteristics is going to tenant this site. Mr. Sheehan can go into the details of what a typical day would look like, but I'll say that what we've submitted, which is a kind of a generic approach to estimating trip activity, well overstates the likely levels of activity and vehicle types that will be generated for this particular site. Most of the activity would be generated at off-site construction projects where employees would actually travel directly to, as opposed to necessarily traveling to the site for day-to-day activities. And while there is storage of material on the site itself that would be transported to various construction sites, that is not an activity that would have intensity every day. Would result in occasional material deliveries to or from the site. and transport of that to the construction site. Once it's on the construction site, most of that trip activity is actually confined to that off-site location. So what that means is that our documented results in here are highly conservative in terms of the traffic generation and impact of the project. Even at that, as it's been presented, this is a modest generating use. It's not a high impact use. And there is ample capacity in and around that area to accommodate the site use. The more relevant issue is accessibility. The proximity of the particular driveway here to Randolph Street in particular raises concern with making sure that the driveway is located in such a way that it has ample visibility to oncoming vehicles to meet certain safety-based criteria, sight lines in particular. And second, that the orientation of the driveway relative to the intersection allows for reasonable accommodation of swept path movements into or out of the property in a way that is sensitive to any cues that might be developing along Hancock Street. In that light, we've actually gone out and documented the sightline characteristics that currently exist. These are street level views of Randolph Street, making a right turn onto Hancock Street, where the site would be located just beyond this existing residential driveway. You'll see in the opposing direction as you're traveling up Hancock Street looking to the left, that's Randolph Street. You see the sight line visibility was specifically measured to ensure that we meet those applicable sightline criteria. What those criteria say is that based on measured travel speeds, you need to maintain a certain visibility distance or sight line. The proposed driveway is located in such a manner that looking along that sight line provides no less than 150 feet of stopping sight distance for a vehicle approaching the driveway to see a vehicle as it's exiting that point. That 150-foot distance exceeds the minimum requirements based on the travel speeds of vehicles negotiating that corner. That speed is about 20 miles an hour as they're negotiating that corner. The sightline requirement based on that travel speed is about 115 feet, so we're well above what the minimum standards would require to be able to safely negotiate the driveway and provide proper visibility to an oncoming vehicle. That said, we've identified several measures that would address and reinforce safe operation of the driveway. They include conceptually pavement markings and delineations for that turn from Randolph onto Hancock Street so that vehicles aren't slingshotting, if you will, onto Hancock Street. They would have to make more of a 90-degree turn and therefore meter their speed. With advanced signage, driveway signage, and advisory speed limit sign of 20 miles an hour to reinforce that slower speed. As well, pavement markings that would clearly identify a do not block the box marking configuration opposite the driveway, so that to the extent any queuing is occurring on Hancock Street, vehicles as they're approaching that would be cognizant of not blocking the driveway and allowing an occasional vehicle to turn from the driveway. Likewise, the driveway features a raised cement concrete feature that is mountable, that while it's delineating vehicles entering and exiting the driveway allows for larger vehicles that might occasionally need to get here, emergency response, for instance, a fire truck, or an occasional articulated vehicle delivering product, to be able to use the driveway and potentially mount that curb if necessary. All designed to an industry standard. So this information was previously presented to this board. It was the subject of peer review. I don't believe that there are any outstanding issues there, but we're glad to answer any specific questions that the board might have as it relates to any of these design elements or what we published in our traffic impact study. I should have opened up by saying that as a professional engineer in the Commonwealth, I've been practicing here for 32 years now. I'm the president and managing principal of a well-established civil engineering, transportation engineering firm here in the Commonwealth. We've worked on hundreds of projects like this. We've got a lot of experience designing these, evaluating them, and I'm certain that based on the limited traffic generation that will occur here due to this project and the combination of these types of features, that we can achieve all of the applicable safety criteria and standards, like we've done on many, many other projects in the Commonwealth. So with that, I'll turn it back to.
Before we do, are there any questions? Yes,
I have a whole bunch, but if they want to finish their presentation, they can
please.
do. I have a whole bunch, but if they want to finish their presentation, they can.
All right.
Rob, could you just speak, that we had also compared, you had done some comparison to the previous project that was approved in 2012, residential, 90-bedroom, 54-unit apartment building, using a similar entrance, just in terms of comparison of, in general, the numbers, just for the record.
Well, this speaks to the point of the specific commercial tenant here is going to be generating activity that really falls outside the traditional peak hours, unlike residential, where this involves workers who occasionally will go to the site, but if they do go to the site, will ordinarily be an outbound trip very early in the morning to get to a construction site, which typically would start at, say, 7 in the morning, maybe 8 in the morning. So to the extent trips are generated here, they're really occurring very early in the morning, prior to typical construction period operations, and they're arriving back at the facility sometime around between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon, again, a non-traditional peak. The residential type project, if it were built here, would actually have the opposite effect. It would actually be generating most of its trip activity during the traditional peak hours, and would likely be generating at least as much trip activity as the proposed use here. So, materially speaking, the commercial nature of this project will have its greatest impact during the lower traffic generating periods of the day. And as I mentioned earlier, we've actually estimated that even conservatively, this is going to be a very low impact project.
Before I ask Mr. Sheehan to come up, I just wanted to reiterate two things that we had mentioned in December, and Rob kind of talked about them. The business that we're talking about is Feeney Brothers Construction, which does a lot of street utility work for National Grid and such. They own it under the name of Hancock Abington LLC, just so we know who's who. And this is intended not to be like a PA Landers granite quarry type of thing with trucks coming in and out every hour. This, in fact, is one of several satellites areas that Feeney Brothers owns, so that if there is an emergency call or just a construction call, like on Route 18 in Abington, they would put their box trucks would be parked in this area. But at the beginning of the project, as you see right now when you go down Route 18, you'll see Feeney Brother equipment parked there overnight. So they may take the box truck out on Monday, and then they'll park it and leave it there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so on the successive mornings, their employees don't show up to Hancock Street. They go to the site. They leave the equipment there. So that is further evidence of what Robert was saying, how it's the traffic numbers that we have projected and designed for, reality is going to be significantly different and lower. This is one of, let's see, there's another satellite in Taunton and Worcester, Norwood, Canton, Hyde Park. So this would only be servicing kind of this immediate general area, the Holbrook, the Weymouth, the Abington, the Whitman area type of thing. I'd like Mike just to reintroduce himself and kind of, again, reorientate us to what Feeney Brothers does, so you can get a better sense as to what they don't do and what they do do.
Thank you. Yeah, Mike Sheehan, Vice President of Real Estate for this project. As the traffic consultant and council pointed out, we've got a big contract with National Grid in this area, Holbrook, Whitman, Hanson. We just actually built a substation for Eversource down in Whitman, Hanson, Braintree, and we use these satellite yards, as council explained, for the box truck and for the employees on Monday to get all their equipment together and bring it to the site. And what we normally do is reach out to neighbors, either commercial or residential, knock on the door and says, hey, we're working in the area. We'd like to be able to put our vehicles in your driveway or on your property, and we'll compensate you for it. And people like the word compensation. So most of our trucks, and it's a goal of ours, to get them on site, because that person drives there at 7 o'clock, and we start work. We're most productive. We're not having travel time, because if they come to the satellite yard, they're going to get their truck, and the first thing they're going to do when they pull out of the yard is go get coffee and take an additional break. So we know that history teaches us that. So in the yard itself, if they are coming out of there, we'll be early, and they usually return by 3 o'clock. And that's if someone we couldn't reach an accommodation with a neighbor. In the yard itself, there'll be 2 people working. There'll be a yard man who has the front end loader, and there'll be the man with the triaxle or the woman with the triaxle. And if somebody calls up and says, hey, I need some 3/4 inch crushed stone down at this job site, the front end loader will load up the triaxle, we'll bring in the 3-inch crushed stone. Or they might call and say, hey, I need some extra steel plates. Can you send down some extra steel plates? Again, productivity. We don't want them leaving the job site to go get that stuff. We know we can get it to them. And that's how our satellite yards run. And this is what that will be. Will be a satellite yard for this area.
Thanks, Mike. And just very briefly, Kelly Engineering, if Garrett could just speak and just remind you all of drainage as it exists now and drainage as it would exist then, I'm sorry. Water, this site is lower than the Hancock Street houses, so it really should not be an issue. But it is something we had to demonstrate, obviously, to your engineer, and your town engineer has reviewed and approved it. And our next stop would also go to Conservation to have them review and approve it. So Garrett Horsfall has been working on this project from the get-go from Kelly Engineering.
Good evening, thank you, Sean. Once again, Garrett Horsfall with the Kelly Engineering Group. As Sean stated, this project has been fully reviewed by the town's consultant with respect to drainage, utilities, grading, layout, and zoning as well. As you can see, at the intersection with Hancock Street, you're at elevation 183. The buildings are down at 168. So essentially all the drainage and the existing watershed flows down to the Beaver Brook today. To mitigate the drainage, we're proposing several subsurface recharge systems and several surface infiltration basins. One of the subsurface recharge systems is here, another one's here, another one here, and then 2 surface ponds here and here, serving the drainage up front. And this all designed per DEP standards, as well as water quality, recharge, and infiltration into the ground as well as reducing peak rate runoff pre and post. Then similar to the front side of the site, the back paved area is treated by a couple water quality devices and recharged into the ground through an infiltration basin. And it's discharged into the existing wetland how it similarly does today. It'll match or decrease the flow into the wetlands today per DEP standards. And once again, it's all been reviewed by the town engineer, and look forward to answering any other questions.
And if I could just add one other point, just so we can orientate ourselves. There is a significant existing wetland area that, this is the Hancock Street right here with the houses on Hancock Street. And this area behind the houses and before our construction area is a protected wetland area that's partially on the Hancock neighbor side and our side. Most of it's on our property. So that will be undisturbed land, a buffer, a natural buffer for both site and sound. Maybe I'll stop there, and if the board or any of us have any questions, we'd be more than happy to try to give as much detail as possible.
Any questions from the public? Gentlemen?
Just to clarify something, Sean, you talked about architectural landscaping, and our requirement does relate to improving the streetscape of the district. However, the subsection above that 5 says landscaping and architectural elements of the proposed use shall include features to minimize visual impacts on surrounding lands. Doesn't resort itself to street views.
No.
So, do we have elevations in here of the buildings proposed?
I believe elevations were submitted, a landscaping plan and also a photometric plan. But again, if you see the relation to existing houses on Hancock Street, The closest building is 350 feet back off of Hancock Street. So there is, landscaping around their own buildings, but in reality, you won't see our buildings unless you come onto the site.
Do you know that for a fact? I don't think that's true at all. Those houses are up higher, they're looking down, and in the wintertime, when there's nothing on the trees, you can see right through it.
I can see
Oh, you
like
might,
tags.
you might, I'm talking about, we have shrubs and bushes out here, you're gonna be driving by here on Hancock Street.
We're not talking streetscapes. The bylaw doesn't say streetscapes. It talks about surrounding lands, surrounding houses,
Yeah.
surrounding properties. That's why I'm saying is that I'm not just gonna wash away this whole landscaping architectural piece of it.
I'm sorry, Rick, we're not asking to wash away. What I had just pointed out was we have a buffer zone of land that was not being touched here. We can't plant anything in there, we can't dig anything or take anything out of there. We tried to intentionally move things back away from our neighbors. We did file some landscaping and the photometric plan. We're not allowed to have any light trespass, which we've documented, and we will include documented at the time of the building permit as required by the building inspector.
But I'm looking for structure elevations as well. Have we received those?
I believe they were filed. If not, we can certainly do so. They're all single-story buildings, a slight pitch in the roof, landscaping at the entrances, typically, very similar to the project, let's say, up on Chestnut Street that's being constructed right now. Out in the back, on the storage area, I mean, that's, I'm going to estimate, 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet out back here. There's no structures out here anyhow in that area. These are 5,000 square foot buildings and 10,000, I believe. They will not all be built at once. They will be kind of phased in. The plan right now is for Feeney Brothers to occupy 2 of the buildings. They could occupy a third if they wanted to. But they will build kind of on an as-needed basis, especially with COVID right now. Everyone's kind of building as needed, not building and then looking for a tenant. But the design has to be approved before anything can be constructed.
Has the fire department signed off on the turnaround on the rear piece of that? I know that, I saw the drawing that they were okay with the turnaround with the buildings, but as you head out back, if there was an issue, do they have turnaround space?
So, we've submitted the swept path analysis, and there will be enough space left open in the construction yard back here for a vehicle to turn around, as well as their apparatuses as well. But I think the applicant will commit to allowing the fire truck or apparatus to have the ability to turn around as needed.
All right. I believe Norwood Engineering talked about the soil testing, that it needs new soil tests before it'll sign off on the storm drainage piece of it.
It was, there were record test pits performed for the previously approved multifamily project. We've used those as a basis of design, and we're agreeable to Norwood Engineering reviewing the test pit logs while we're doing during construction. And I believe that Norwood Engineering had suggested that as well.
So you won't do the soil testing until you're doing construction?
We'll do it prior to construction to verify the design criteria.
All right. I have a little bit concerned with that because I don't want to get too far down the path and all of a sudden find out, oh, wait, there's an issue here. So,
Well, that's the point of, if there is an issue, it stops.
yeah, but if you've already cut down 6 acres of trees, then that's, not a good solution.
They would, I don't want to speak for the engineer, but they'd be doing it in the retention areas.
The reason for not doing it as of today, we'd like to get the permit first. We can then go back there with the machine and knock down any trees needed minimally to access each of these systems in order to form the pit without going out there today and just doing it and knocking down the vegetation. And as I said, we have good record test pits for previously approved project, which is the basis of the design for these systems.
When was that test pit done?
2012.
Okay. Regarding 139, that's some of the traffic mitigation, are we talking painted lines? Or are you rebuilding the curb?
That was a point of discussion at the other hearing. We've conceptually laid out those improvements to be thermoplastic, highly reflective markings, but that certainly could be another design treatment. And the applicant is open to comment by the board, and will provide a response based on that input.
My personal preference, and I can't speak for the board members, is to see something a little bit harder than just paint on the sidewalk. 'Cause I don't think people will pay attention to that. They'll still slingshot around that corner because that's what they've done for the last 60 years.
Yep. Certainly, there are probably two means of achieving that more rigid type approach. And that is scored concrete, rumble strip type design along what I'd call the shoulder area. So to the extent the vehicle's actually attempting to slingshot, so to speak, they would find it uncomfortable to do that. The rumble quality of that type of a design really limits, speed, and makes it apparent that you shouldn't be doing. That's one option, and the other is a curb line adjustment. We have not had any discussions with Public Works as to what their thoughts or concerns might be with hardening up the shoulder like that, but those are certainly more definitive ways to meter the speed.
The southern curb line, I guess, from the entrance exit on Hancock Street, it looks like there's a bump out that exceeds and goes into the right-of-way. Can you explain that?
The curbs that are shown here actually are all contained, well, for the most part, within the public way or in the immediacy of where turns would be made from the driveway. There's no bump out, if you will. The maximum extent of where the curbs are shown are actually inboard of where the travel lanes are on Hancock Street. They don't extend into the travel areas. Because this is conceptual, it's hard to distinguish between other driveways along here or where the curbs might exist. The idea is that you have a minimum, I believe it's 15-foot offset from the center line to where the curbs would be. And because this is conceptual, it's you can see in very light line types where the existing driveway is for residential. The idea would be that this curb wrap around and match up with where that driveway is, and on the southerly side there's another driveway, it would do the same. Right? So the end point or the extension of where these curbs are would not extend into the travel way, and they would leave a minimum 15-foot offset between the curb and where the center line of the road is.
But would it extend into the current roadway?
Well, the current roadway is not, well, let's look at a photo. So this is the existing residential driveway. This is the vicinity of where that curb would be. There's a painted shoulder area currently in that vicinity. The idea is that the curb would actually wrap around and match up with where this grassed area is. It would not extend beyond that so-called shoulder of the roadway. So while there isn't any curbing along that edge today, and this would introduce some curbing, that curbing would be inboard of the so-called shoulder of the road. So there'd be an offset from where the existing edge of the travelway is, which is delineated with a white pavement marking. So you probably have about a 3-foot offset from that point where the curb matches in with existing conditions.
So I'm also tripping over, I'm pulling up the exact language. It's basically minimal acceptable visibility. I think, what was the exact term that he
Yes,
used?
the sightline standard here, and you can see it here, well, actually there's a diagram that shows this one definitively. The travel path of a vehicle as they're coming around from Randolph to Hancock Street has a minimum length of 150 feet from the point where you see a vehicle exiting the driveway to that point. That's the sight line that's available, that's achievable. The speed at which vehicles are traversing that corner is about 20 miles an hour, right? would be 25. But I would say, you know, on average, or even above average, is a 20 mile. It's hard to go faster than 20 miles an hour on that curve. That would require that distance be at least 115 feet. So we're well in excess of that. Would we like to have more? Certainly, but we absolutely meet the requirements of providing sufficient sight line. What that sight line allows an approaching vehicle to do is to see the vehicle and react to it before any collisions occur, right? And that calculation is based on the amount of time it takes to see a vehicle, for your brain to react to it, to push on the brakes, and then to come to a complete stop. Right? So that minimum distance has to be at least 115 feet. We've got 150. Now, the idea here in this concept is to really meter speed. We want people to go 15 miles an hour, maybe less as they're making that turn. The way to do that is by forcing more of a 90-degree turn, which is what this concept does. And to your point, to reinforce that further, you could actually have other design treatments that reinforce that better than just markings. That could be scored concrete, it could be an adjustment to the curb line itself to physically force it.
So I guess this is more of a comment for my fellow board members than a question. I have a concern adding 156 trucks to that intersection of Hancock and 139, where we're already seeing a lot of accidents on that stretch of Randolph Street, and to now add 160 more trucks, that with the additional time it takes, no, that's not going to happen?
160 trucks?
I'm just questioning where you're getting the...
Wasn't it 160 daily trips?
Daily trip, well, you know, let me give you the exact
I think it was 168 in a 24-hour period, but it's not all trucks.
Correct. It's mainly passenger vehicles.
Very few trucks.
Passenger vehicles?
Yes, the vast majority of trips here would be by passenger vehicle. So just to clarify, over the course of a typical peak hour, no more than about 10% of all of the trips made would be truck-related, right? And that's what the industry standards say. Over the course of an entire day, no more than 20% of all trips made would be truck-related. So those numbers, now the peak hour numbers that we've used here, just to give you context, would have no more than about 30 cars an hour either coming into or leaving this property. And that's assuming a traditional, what we call warehousing use. So think Amazon, right? That type of warehousing use is generating that kind of activity for that square footage. Where we know this operator doesn't operate like Amazon. It's a much different entity. So the reality is most trips will be passenger vehicles. The numbers will be substantially below what we're actually estimating in here at the same time. You know, so we're not expecting there to be any material impact from a capacity standpoint on this intersection. We anticipate as a job one, making sure that we meet the applicable safety criteria so that this can operate efficiently and safely, and that's what this does. And it certainly could be enhanced through your suggestions.
So we're talking all the trucks in the morning pulling out, because there will be trucks pulling out, all the work vans, all the trucks, whatever, the Feeney brothers, your tenants, everyone coming out in the morning to go off their job sites.
So
You're still talking how many additional big vehicle trips in those peak hours?
Yeah, thank you. We have 6 crews right now. National Grid has said you probably won't get any more. So if we didn't achieve what our goal is, to have all the vehicles parked where the work is, there'd be 2 employees going in for each crew, and then both of them getting in one truck and driving there at 7 o'clock, if that's allowed by the town. They'd be out of there by 7 o'clock, 7:15, hopefully 7:30 on the job site, coming back between 3 and 3:30. In the daytime, after 9 o'clock, anytime from 9 to like 2, a triaxle might pull out to bring in material. Some days there's no calls at all. Some days there's no calls at all, because sometimes we drop it off the night before from our main yard in Dorchester. We are a 24-hour operation, so it's a lot of times employees come in, the supervisor sends on the laptop what he needs for the day. If we can fill him that night, we fill him that night. So it's really a low, I know you look at the studies and this warehouse use, we're not at Amazon. You know, we're nowhere near that. And you will not see a lot of traffic, and I've been doing this prior to the Feeney Brothers with National Grid, and that's all our goal. So you're not going to see the kind of traffic that I think a traffic report might report for the generically for that type of industry.
Okay, I mean, I'm not talking Amazon, I'm talking 30 vehicles going up that hill, 7 o'clock in the morning, between two houses. And then going to that intersection as the morning rush is starting.
I'm not sure where you're getting 30 vehicles.
Well, that's why I'm asking is how many vehicles we're talking in the morning, not just between.
6 crews right now, that's 6 block trucks.
Right,
If
and then-
we-
and then
if
tenants.
we fail at what we're supposed to do, meaning that we can't find outside properties compensation, which we're very successful at, there would be 2 people driving there prior to 7 o'clock. Sometimes they drive together, sometimes separate cars. Let's say separate cars, that's 12 trips into the yard. They get into the box truck, 2 guys in a truck, they drive to the site. So between 6:30 and 7:30, 12 in at the worst-case scenario, and 6 out. And then the U2 yard workers.
Okay,
But I can tell you, it won't even be that number.
and then we have tenants, but we don't know who
Well,
the
right now,
tenants-
Rick, to that point, that's a good point. We're phasing this in. We don't know where the world is right now. I know it originally, that's what we had. So right now, we're not sure. We know we can fill up 2 buildings that we need for our equipment, and then we're just going to see where we're at. But our tenants at our other locations, we don't do landscapers because they leave a mess everywhere they go. We don't do paving companies because they leave a mess wherever they go. We would look for the local electrician or the local plumber or the local carpenter that has 1 van that goes out. And that's why they're built small that way. They're built so you can't have a tractor trailer in there, inside there. So that's why they're built. But right now, you know, we're going to phase it in and see where we are if this is approved a year from now. We're not quite sure where we are.
I certainly understand that, but I have to consider what's full build-out like.
Yeah.
And I might ask through the chair, and this is reported in our study, these are the actual numbers that we've used in our report. This anticipates using generic warehouse-type land use category and a component of what we call office to generate a total of 37 total trips entering and exiting the property during a typical peak hour, commuter hours in the morning, and about 39 total in the afternoon. And what that breaks down to is about 30 entering trips per hour coming in and only 8 going out. And likewise, the converse in the afternoon, 10 coming in and 29 going out, right? And that assumes full occupancy with standard uses, the electricians, the carpenters, whoever may opt to rent space in this type of a facility. Those types of trades and activities generally are off the site early in the morning and they're back in the mid-afternoon. They're not unlike what Mike's operation is like as the primary tenant of the property. When you take those trips, the 37 to 39 total trips during a peak hour, and you distribute them proportionally among the various ways of getting to or from here, and you look at Route 139, for instance, to the east, that's the highest impacted leg of road. That's about 16 trips per hour, 1 vehicle every 4 minutes. To the south, about the same, combined, 16 trips to or from the south, 5 to or from the west, 1 vehicle every 12 minutes. So these, in our opinion, are very modest numbers. They do assume the full, complete, highest and best use potential for the property and would not, based on those numbers, present a capacity impact of that intersection. The vast majority of these trips are not trucks, and if they are trucks, they're box trucks or vans. Again, you know, if you took the 39, 37, 38, say 40 trips in round numbers, and you took 10% of that number, roughly 4 of those trips per hour would be box trucks, not heavy commercial vehicles. So that's the snapshot of what this is potentially could look like if you had full and highest potential use.
Can you, it's been a few months, can you remind me what that rear lot's going to be used for?
Right, that's why I was rising. Basically, that would be the storage of where you might have gravel or PVC pipe, safety equipment. And to that, I had asked Mr. Sheehan, how often, if you had to bring in a truck of PVC pipe, which might be the longest truck that you'd see out there, how often would you see those type of deliveries? And he said, once every 2 to 3 months. Once every 2 to 3 months, you'd have a truck come and restock the pile. But on a day-to-day basis, you can go right down Route 18 and see them. It's the box trucks that Feeney Brothers is, you'll see them throughout the South Shore and the North Shore.
Mr. Sheehan, how big is the box?
They go anywhere from 16 to 20, 22 feet. We have different sizes, but
Standard size box truck,
about 20 feet, yeah. That's probably the biggest we have.
like a 10-wheeler or anything.
Oh, no, it's six-wheelers. It's a six-wheeler, yeah, six-wheeler. And I know they're talking about the rumble strip. We're okay with that. You know, obviously, safety's a big thing in our industry. And, you know, if you guys feel and that the rumble strip will help, we're certainly agreeable to that rumble strip to cut down on those cars speeding around that corner.
You folks know that the town is doing improvements to that stretch of Hancock Street.
Yeah.
You know, putting in sidewalks and stuff like that. I don't know how that ties in with your design. I go to the fish place, I see the construction going on there. But,
Yeah,
I don't think it's tied in with your plans at all.
We would certainly coordinate that. You know, we're at only the conceptual design stage, because once we have a solution that the board is comfortable with, you've heard from Mike that he's willing to do those types of things to achieve safety. I don't believe that anything that we've talked about here would be in conflict with what the town is currently planning. This would be an add-on. And ideally, it would be nice to coordinate the construction activities so that, you know, you build it once and the mess is done. So we certainly look to coordinate with the town to see if we can match those up.
I think it's too late to coordinate because the town is actually doing a thing like that. But I would-
Yeah, they'll be
I
done.
would talk to the town
Yeah.
and, you know, to do that, I work for Calling Planning Council, I was gonna look in the database and see if we've done any ATRs, you know, machine counts around there. I can tell you, this project is, before they built the Cisco warehouse in Plimpton, we did turn movement counts and ATRs before they built it and after. This ain't Cisco.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, we'd be glad to coordinate that. Like I say, I don't believe that there are any conflicts between what we're proposing to do and what the town is initiating for improvements here. You know, they're not mutually exclusive, certainly, but we're not proposing things here that would be in conflict with that.
So in your final plan for this, do you incorporate the improvements to the town?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. This will be subject to detailed survey, and during that process, we'll obtain any plans that the town has available. We'll incorporate those into the design and show the details accordingly. Absolutely.
Because, you know, town's putting sidewalks in there, so you're assuming there's a level of pedestrian activity. And I don't think there's a crosswalk going across Hancock Street on the 139.
Correct.
Because there's no sidewalks
Right.
on that other side of Randolph Street.
Right.
I'm just thinking about this all in my head, the work that's been done out there, you know, the fact that they are putting sidewalks in, but they're not gonna cross over the street, so there should be a conflict.
They're just replacing the existing sidewalks. I don't think they're adding any.
Yeah, probably putting some curb in and stuff like that.
Would be nice to bring gas down that way, if someone could convince Grid to bring it down.
So what Mr. Sheehan Mr. Michaud has proposed, Mr. Sheehan has agreed to, if the board determines, would be that the rumble strip basically would be in the breakdown lane. So it wouldn't interfere with sidewalks. So it would deter people from taking that, as we would call it, slingshotting, you know, hugging the curve.
How does the rumble
I
strip,
would love, you know, you can't put it in the breakdown lane, yeah, you're not gonna put it in a traffic lane. Jesus.
No, but I'm just saying, it could be coordinated with any sidewalk work, because it won't.
how does the rumble strip affect snow plowing?
They're designed so that they can be plowed. You know, DOT uses these
Yeah.
quite regularly, actually. And they're several different ways to design that, but usually there's about 1 to 2 inch grade differential, if you will, between the travel surface and the ridges, the top of ridges of those. And we can certainly work with your Public Works Department to come up with a design standard that they're comfortable with.
There's no doubt that the cars need to be slowed down and coming around that corner.
Well, it's funny in that corner, because this is a part of a solution, but that whole S from Chestnut Street to where Hancock comes out it's really unallowable. If anybody stops, traffic going 45, 50 miles an hour has to hit the brakes hard or do a swerve out into the other lane a little bit to get around them when they pull into Chestnut Street. Or if they don't get off Hancock Street fast enough, which I'm thinking of that slingshot, sometimes when they get out of the way, say, oh my God, I was just about riding up his rear end. But I think there's more to, I think this might spur their thoughts to do something with that intersection. We know it's.
There's talks about fixing that at Chestnut Street and Hancock Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Bruce could probably,
The other end of Chestnut Street, North Quincy Street, that's all designed, that's in construction right now.
construction,
the roundabout. And towns, I think there's gonna be we had a hearing, there's gonna be a roundabout at Chestnut Street.
Oh, it'll be there.
But the other thing is, 139 coming this way here, in a perfect world, there would be a right turn lane designated on 139 to go on to Hancock Street. And someday, if that four-way is ever redesigned, it would be nice to have a, right turning lane on Hancock Street, because you got the cars going toward ET and 139. And if it's a single lane and they've got to turn on to Hancock Street, I mean, I know that intersection very well. A right turn lane would help. But that's out of the scope of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it would entail land acquisitions and impacts to private property, so it's really kind of beyond what this particular applicant can do. But certainly a big first step would be doing something along the lines of the score concrete or some kind of modification of curb.
What you can do within what you've got now without taking land.
Yeah.
That's what I think we're asking.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, a couple more quickly. Attorney Riley, the Kelly Engineering Group letter from February 21st.
I didn't write it.
Under site design, point 5 talks about parking space calculations
Yep.
and change of use and parking requirements. And the response was, any future use will require the filing of a change use and occupant form. The building department should trigger a review of required and available parking spaces. Since the planning board only meets once a month, we would suggest that the requested note not be added to the plan. Please also see comment number 1 on page 1 above. And comment number 1 on page 1 above is acknowledged.
Well, it's based,
So, yeah, I'm looking to get a little bit more information on this.
sure. Norwood Engineering's initial comment was basically a concern over making sure there's enough parking on site, not knowing when some of the future tenants might be. Under the zoning bylaws and given the size of these buildings and the projected uses, I think we're required to have 24 parking spaces on the entire site, I believe. We have a little over 70 parking spaces, so that we don't have to add spaces and that we have flexibility. The initial comment from Norwood Engineering was, whenever a new tenant came into this property, we should go to the planning board to have the planning board confirm that there's enough parking. And our response was, we have 3 times as much parking as required, and that would, it's typically something that the building department looks at. When you change a commercial use, you have to fill out a form to notify the building department what the change of use is. And then they would look at parking requirements and things like that. So we already exceed what's required, and thus we asked that the requirement that every time a new tenant came, we would have to submit to the planning board for a hearing, which is only once a month. We asked that that not be included because it's an issue that's already taken care of at the occupancy permit level at the building department.
What's the standard when a change of use does have to come before us then?
Usually there isn't, unless it's a zoning difference. I'm not aware of that happening at all.
Your largest change would be if, how there's pop-up churches everywhere nowadays. that if someone took over one, I mean, I've seen it done, take over one of those buildings and then they had 150 members. That's a change thing, and that it would review that, the building inspector would give flag whether or not they could even move in there or not.
Right. And a lot of people get confused too about what's a change of use. You know, if we had a carpenter in a building and then they left and a plumber moved in, that's not really a change, that's not a change of use. If you had, for example, a carpenter in a building and a retail store wanted to go in there, that's a change of use. That's actually, we're not asking for that, it's not allowed in this area. So if there was something significant, you know, if Target became, I don't know, multifamily, that's a change of use that might require recalculation of parking requirements. That's probably a very bad example because Target already has more parking than a multifamily would require. But, you know, there are commercial buildings in Abington that have change of tenants, you know, all the time, but they don't come to the planning board unless it triggers a zoning requirement that the planning board has jurisdiction over.
One more, I'm sorry. So this isn't a water protection district? This isn't the water protection overlay district?
Not in the well protection overlay district. There's a FEMA area and there's I'm sorry, you're talking about the floodplain?
Yeah.
Yeah, section 175-35, the floodplain and wetlands protection overlay district, yes. As you all know, about half the town is in that district, so we need to demonstrate that there would be no runoff that would affect our neighbors in a negative way. As Kelly Engineering has demonstrated through the submittals and in its presentation, and as Norwood Engineering has agreed, the water doesn't flow uphill. The water will continue to flow down towards our property. It will continue to go towards the wetlands. It'll just be cleaned by our drainage system that is being proposed, and it's been reviewed and approved by the town's engineer.
And it's within the 100-year floodplain?
In the FEMA floodplain, there's a small section in there. The engineers can speak to that better than I.
So floodplain's at elevation approximately 160.2. All of the proposed work, besides the work associated for the crossing, and as well as a small section of the stormwater management pond, it's still slightly within the floodplain. So what we've done is we've compensated at the contour interval for the floodplain in this section, so that'll match the pre and post flood storage volumes. And again, the only work associated in the floodplain is for the crossing, which meets the stream crossing standards, as well as a small section of the pond and retaining wall servicing the building. Again, it meets the contour interval method for restoring volume lost by the development.
You said it's 160 elevation?
160.2. There was actually, back at the development back in 2012, the multifamily development, there was actually a letter of map amendment issued for this, which defined the floodplain even further. So we've represented that on the plan as well.
Okay. My concern, and one of the concerns I have is that normally we don't wait for conservation to make their determinations before we rule on site plan. My concern is that this is next to a significant wetland feature in a couple different areas. And I have questions or concerns as to how that is going to play out, what their concerns are going to be, what changes they're going to want to make. I'm particularly concerned that this is a pretty low-lying area. It's a bowl, so everything drains down into it. And of course, there's a big wetland out back. But, you know, do we have a situation where we get one of those freak 4-inch rainstorms and now all of a sudden this entire area is flooded?
And
so the 100-year storm is approximately 7.5 inches. So, I mean, the thing's been designed for the 10, 25, 50, 100, which, I mean, the 10 years probably about a 5-inch storm. So the whole system's designed, again, to handle a 100-year storm. And once again, any water is going to flow back towards us. We're in the bowl, towards the brook and the adjacent wetland system. So we're essentially feeding the wetlands again, matching what's getting there today.
But the roadway, the buildings are elevated enough so that, I'm thinking, it might have been 8 years ago at this point, we had that April where we just got rain and everything was just absolutely flooded.
Right. And I just want
one of those months where we get that record-breaking 8, 9, 10 inches of rain,
right,
that this isn't going to become, you know, underwater.
And that's why Feeney Brothers hires an engineer to design the things that they're gonna spend money on building, because they don't want that either. And just to clarify for the viewers at home, for the board, there are two huge differences between a FEMA flood zone and the local Abington Floodplain and Wetlands Protection Overlay District. Two completely different things. Just because a part of your house lot or your commercial property is in the local wetland and floodplain protection district doesn't mean you're in a FEMA flood zone, not whatsoever. It just means that from a 1973 map, there were areas in town where they either had a lot of clay in the soil, or there was known wetlands or issues that you needed to make sure that you weren't going to create a new drainage problem. In a FEMA flood zone, then the engineers, if we're going to adjust those areas, so let's just say there's, for simplicity's sake, 100 square feet of a FEMA flood area that water would go into in a big storm. If we're going to move one of the, adjust the size of that, we need to compensate by enlarging it somewhere else. So there's at least that same 100 feet or more when we're done with the project. Is that?
Correct. So this area over here, as you sort of define, each contour represents the volume that is lost today for the crossing and the slight site development features with the pond and parking. And just to add on, the buildings are at elevation 168, and the adjacent parking grades are just about that same, about 167. So that would never really back up to the building elevation. It would all find its way to the river before it ever got anywhere close to the finished floor of the building or the site elevation.
Okay. Another question, I'm sorry, and I'll yield after this. I'm just looking again at the bridge that's going to be crossing Beaver Brook. It looks like the roadway elevation's 169. So, looks like a pretty lengthy section. You're building a significant bridge, it looks like.
It's going to be designed as a arch culvert system to meet the stream crossing standards and open bottom to allow the river to flow as it does today. And for that, the arch will be a few feet high, and then you'll have a few feet of structural fill above it in order to get your water lines through to the back and have your significant roadway depth in order to construct the bridge. So you're right, it's going to be about like 10 feet in height as well.
Yeah, so I'm looking at some of the elevations, 159, and then the roadway's 170, so it's just all of that's going to be...
It'll be all segmental block wall, just to limit the disruption, obviously, to the wetland resource areas around there. But to match the state standards for stream crossing, you have to have a certain height as well as the openness factor of the arch. So that's where the height factor comes in to allow wildlife and the stream to flow during significant storms.
Okay.
And just to add to that, Norwood Engineering noted that in one of their initial reports too, that had to conform to the state DEP standards, which it does, and which Norwood Engineering has reviewed. And the Conservation Commission in Abington, typically in projects like this, I don't want to speak for the conservation, but past practice procedure has been that they wanted to see the planning board's engineer approve the stormwater management design before it got to the conservation, because they want to know that the town's engineer has seen it and approved it, because they do not have an on-board engineer. In any event, if they or DEP will get a copy of this, have anything that they want to tweak, they have the right to do that. And as we said, if there is anything that's tweaked, we'll resubmit those updates to you so you know what they are. If they're minor, they're submitted just for the record. If they say, move the roadway 15 feet to the left, then you may decide, let's have another hearing and review this. But we won't know that until DEP and Concom review that.
Any other questions?
I have a question about Cape Cod berm. That there are two it's everywhere, but there seems to be two areas. Well, one, that first 100 or 60 feet or so coming off of Hancock Street. I'd like to see that as granite curbing on that area, and I would also, that'd be the strongest one. The other one, I'm not sure why, is not the bridge that crosses over, or the road, which is called that section, that 160 feet of, with the retaining walls back on each side crossing over Beaver Brook Road, would also have granite curbing.
So I'm not sure if Mike's agreeable to any curb extensions into the site, but we've matched the existing curbing to the throat stones as well. And against the building, you'll have your concrete curbing for pedestrian access and sidewalk protection, but we propose Cape Cod berm throughout the site. At the bridge crossing, there'll be guardrails on each side, so that there would be added curb protection if we did choose that, but there would be significant protection in the form of the guardrail. We don't think that Cape Cod berm or concrete curb that we needed there.
Actually talking about for drainage purposes, because the Cape Cod berm does very little to stop water from passing over it. Whereas where a granite curb or it boxes in the water and it can't jump the curb.
So for the fair point, for the steep section, I think we'd be agreeable to change that, just as you pointed out, that it will help capture the water better. But again, I'm not sure if might be agreeable to.
I'm not. The front end?
I'm not quite sure where.
That steep grade from Hancock Street down would be.
Just right as you go into the property?
For the first, what, 100? I wouldn't concede that Cape Cod berm doesn't channel water. It certainly does. The monolithic Cape Cod berm that you use nowadays. Granite curbing, okay, some people think it looks better, but I'm not sure that we're losing anything as far as channeling water, because it has been reviewed by both engineers.
It's commonly used in all practices, and
Yeah, I'm seeing it used a lot, but I've also noticed it does nothing to maintain the look of a road. It gets driven over because it's not really anything. People, will pull right over it, and it doesn't seem to do very much for road water at all. The slope is there's such a low slope on it.
yeah, well, I mean, our standard detail has a 6-inch reveal, which would be the same as the curb. So I'm not sure if the other details in town have only been 3 or 4 inches, which is standard, but we show a 6-inch reveal, which will capture the water even better than maybe a 3 or 4 inch detail, which I've seen in other industry.
Yeah, I would also note, the bridge we were speaking of, that is just the connection point to the storage area back, so it's going to be very limited and little traffic to that area. So I don't think there's any need for that there, especially when there's a guardrail right next to it.
Yeah, I can agree with that down there. I'm not certain of that. I've seen where that detail with the granite curves really seems to help maintain the cross through, so it doesn't deteriorate over time. Or if it does deteriorate over time, it's still together, it still looks good, even if the weeds are popping out of it. But the top section there, that large slope, I realize that Hancock Street's really just a crumbling, mess. And I don't know if we should, I think we could upgrade a little bit and put the granite curb on that slope right.
You're just asking for right here?
Right down, right there.
Right here, and just on this side, right? Does it flows that way?
No, on both sides.
Oh, okay. Just, yeah, we can do that, just right here.
On both sides.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We could be agreeable to concrete curbs in lieu of granite. It'd be granite at the throat stones, and at the radii where it turns straight, we turn it to concrete.
Just looking at the concrete curbs outside of Town Hall, I'd say no, because they're falling apart.
With salt.
With salt, yeah, that's its own problem.
We'll just go.
Just wanted to throw something out. You got the concrete curb, what about using pervious pavement? You've got the wetlands there, and, some sort of pervious pavement system to allow the water to go in. Okay, well, I'm just throwing that out. I'm a planner.
I know you're not, but it's just it's a private commercial driveway, so we do want to build it to industry standard. I understand your point, and I don't mean to be sharp, but I know, it's been reviewed by both engineers, and I think it's.
Okay, it's just a question. It's a question I had to ask. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Tell you why. It was down at Bridgewater State University. And behind the science building, they have the artificial wetlands. I know that they have pervious pavement. I was looking at this site, and I saw that vast wetland.
And we're well under the last housing requirement. Environmentally, it's pretty solid design.
Any other questions to the board? Any questions? Can we close the public hearing? Motion?
No, hold on.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we touched upon the field last time. I haven't heard that mentioned at all with all the stuff over the bill.
Could you take the microphone and give us your street address and so forth?
Yeah, Eric Trinity, I bought the land that's, we're speaking about right now. And I was at the last meeting, there was a lot of talk, points of contention was the wetland impact by the amount of fill that was gonna be brought in, and also the vehicle traffic, because that is a bad spot, and 115 feet is pretty quick at 70 miles an hour that people doing 139. Also, there was no date on the letter that was sent out for this meeting. I had to contact the town hall, and I'm pretty sure the guy that lives on that corner would be here, because he had spoken about that issue before.
That's true.
And I just want that to be out for record right now.
but I also wasn't required to send a letter out either.
Okay,
So
that's
that's my
fine.
bad.
I mean, I'm
I
just
just
saying,
send it
because
out
it's been a
with a
long
letter,
time
yep.
with COVID, that, you
Yep.
know, everyone should get their fair pass.
Absolutely.
And that was just my only questions for you. That and the water, because there's a lot of stuff getting displaced there, and it's pretty wet back there. You don't need to get permits to knock trees down to see that. There's a road that drives out there that you can get stuck on. I mean,
Right.
So,
No, I won't beat a dead horse, but I think the traffic has been significantly discussed. You're gonna get notice in the conservation hearing, we'll talk more about wetlands at that point, but you don't have to believe me, but the engineers have designed it and the town engineer has reviewed it to show that the water is being collected on site, is being treated on site, and is being released safely in its original direction, or current direction, I should say. So those of you, like Mr. Trenna, who live up on Hancock Street, this will not affect you in any way, water-wise, because as you know, it all flows away from you. The amount of fill that's brought in to make certain areas level is compensated by the retention in the catch basins and all. So it is designed to protect the wetlands. It has to be designed to protect the wetlands, and you can't get approval.
no, I understand that. But I mean, how many times you drive by these holding ponds that are supposed to drain in 3 days and they don't? I mean, we see them in this area all the time. I mean, and that's what I was told last time, that that'll drain in, I think you said 72 hours?
Correct, yeah, per DEP standards, it'll drain within 72 hours, and, again, we're gonna have to do a confirmatory test pit to confirm the soils, but, and, the ponds we maintain, all the reason why the ponds back up is because they're not maintained properly, and you get the silt that's built up, and the, silt is also a combination that comes in the modern catch basin system, or a water quality device. These will have water quality devices to trap the silt, and it'll prevent the silt from getting to the basin, which a lot of times is what causes that to bounce rain.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. Motion made. Close the public hearing. We hear it seconded?
Yep.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
What was the motion?
Motion is to close the public hearing.
One more question. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, about what we've been presented. I believe our requirement is that driveways can't be closer than 75 feet to intersections. And I wonder if, do we exceed that here?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I have to look.
Is traffic check here,
Yes.
like 10 feet.
Thank you.
Well, that's the turn, the driveway is after the turn.
Right. The question is whether or not the proposed driveway is within 75 feet of an existing intersection?
Correct. I can pull up the language momentarily.
Mrs. Shea is looking this up right now.
175-47, I believe.
I believe it's a, I don't have the updated version of that,
If you took the extension.
right, you have to extend the street lines to the intersection.
It appears that it's about 80 feet.
Yeah, driveway shall be no closer than 75 feet to any intersection of street lines, which shall be measured from the midpoint on the radius of the street layout lines.
So that would be even more than 80.
Sean?
Yeah, it's at least 80 feet.
Okay.
For the plan.
Yeah.
I mean, in real life, we don't know plans.
So, do we have a complete list of all permits and waivers and everything else they're asking for?
In the letter from Norwood Engineering on May 15th, it addresses all of that.
And their application asks what relief they're looking for a special permit.
There are 4 permits before you: site plan approval, special permit to work in the floodplain, and then the last 2 are actually related. Special permit for the open lab storage in that rear area under H2 and 5. One is materials, one is truck or trailer.
So are we ready to vote on the motion to close the public hearing?
Yep.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Somebody want to make a motion on approval of the site plan with the letter of Norwood Engineering of May 15th, 2020? To all, Please?
The letter of May 15th from Road Engineering,
Right.
conditions.
and what was the end of?
The letter of May 15th,
Right,
the 3 conditions in here.
yes, the 3 conditions.
And I'll make that motion.
And also, in addition to that, that on the intersection with 139 and Hancock Street, that the Public Works converse with us or and to establish that, whether it be scored concrete or whatever, and that the granite curb be at the entrance. I don't know for how many feet,
About
but
100
that,
feet, 100 feet? 100 feet?
how many feet, Jeff?
100 feet on each side?
Coming off of Hancock Street.
Are we putting into effect the hours of operation?
I haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Do you all agree with the granite straight face curving?
100 feet, yeah.
Go ahead. What was your next question, Rick?
Are we limiting hours of operation?
No.
I think there needs to be some limits, except for in cases of emergency. That this entrance is going between 2 residential houses in a residential district, aside from, it's a Muppet district, but everything around it is residential homes. And we don't know how many large vehicles are going to be coming in and out of here at full build-out. We don't know what times they're going to be operating. I think there needs to be some safeguard in case this becomes an issue down the road. And I have concerns about a lot of, there could be a situation with full build-out where you start to have a dozen box trucks pulling out at 6:30 in the morning next to homes. And I would have a concern with that if I was living there. So, I don't know if any board members share my concern, but I would like to have that added as a condition that, work sites we limit to 7 o'clock for a reason.
I think the town has that bylaw, doesn't it? Time for
bylaw.
is 7 in the morning, I think. I
But
think it's already there.
I just want to make sure that applies in this situation because it's a little bit different. It's a Muppet district that's surrounded by houses.
Bob, what's the situation on that?
Other than emergencies.
I mean, you're,
Town bylaw.
yeah, you have,
a problem with buying private bylaw.
Yeah, that's the way I would leave it.
Again, I just want to make sure it would apply in this specific situation because it's,
There's noise bylaws for almost any sort of
Right.
use anywhere. So
Yeah.
we would certainly do that.
Are we there?
please?
Are we there? Are we there with the,
I think we're there if someone wants to.
I'll second it then.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I'm going to be voting no because I still don't know how this is going to play out with conservation. I know that normally doesn't impact it, but
If it's changed to the conservation, they have to come back
Yeah.
before us with this
I
letter.
still have a lot of concerns for the fact they're bringing in 15 feet of fill for that back lot, right next to a wetland. I have a lot of concern about that. I have concern about this use in this area. And I know it's a Muppet district again, but I think it's a heavy use for what's around it. And I have a lot of concerns about the entrance, the vehicles coming out, the impact that's going to have on morning traffic. And,
I think it's, there was a use that was already approved there, it was residential, this is far.
Yeah, and I wasn't on that board, and I
Far
probably
less.
and I might have voted against it. So, I can only vote what's in front of me, and I don't like this, and I don't think it's a good use of it. So I'm going to be voting no.
Any other comments? On the motion of the site plan review, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So for, and with opposed is Rick. And special permit in the floodplain to work in the floodplain area.
Motion?
Motion made. Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Abstain.
Abstained. And what was the third thing we needed on that, Sean?
Special permit under 175H2 and H5 for the open lot storage of materials and trailers.
Motion made.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No.
One opposed. Thanks.
Thanks for your time, and it's been a lot of time. We will report back to you after the conservation hearing.
Sean, I need all that stuff you sent
Yeah,
up.
we'll get PDFs of that, is that what you prefer? We'll take a copy, we'll both.
PDF will be fine.
Thank you.
They have to look identical to that.
Yeah, they will.
Okay,
I briefed them before we started.
all right.
We'll have a 5-minute recess and return back here at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Dispensary LLC. With me is a member of Green Harbor, Nick Patel, and as well as other members of the Patel family. Also, the project engineer, Paul Mirabito from Ross Engineering, our architect, Pedro Alameda from BKA Architects, and Sean Kelly to address traffic on behalf of Anaston Associates. It's been quite a while since we were here. Just by way of quick background, this site contains almost 15,000 square feet, 14,948 square feet. We propose a adult marijuana dispensary here on 1,732 square foot site or building. We currently have 19 parking spaces on site. We've now entered into a letter of intent to acquire an additional 35 spaces next door at 1420 Abington Street, which should just give us a lot, more than ample parking, although we meet enough parking on site under the bylaw.
Excuse me a minute, what?
What street was that?
It's 1420 Bedford Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have misstated. I might have said Abington Street, I
Street, yeah, I was
apologize.
wondering what
But
that
that's Whitman, I think it's Whitman Auto. So we have a letter of intent to lease parking spaces. Obviously, this site is in the marijuana overlay district. It's a business developed zone. We first entered into a letter of intent for this site back in April of 2019. In August, we negotiated a host agreement with the town. We held community outreach agreements back in October of 2019. We first met with you in February. We responded to some of the peer review comments for a follow-up hearing in March, and then, of course, the pandemic occurred, and this is now our second meeting. I'd like to have Mr. Patel sort of talk about, very quickly, the overview of what we anticipate here, and then we'll turn it over to the experts to talk about the updated plans. Thank you.
My name is Nick Patel, CEO of Green Harbor Dispensary. To give you a little background of our company, we're a local company. Our team members mainly consist of Massachusetts locals. Personally, I'm from Braintree, Massachusetts. We have other locations that we are working on. One of our locations is the Middleborough Cultivation and Manufacturing Facility that's actually up and running, so we have been growing our own product. We have another location in Provincetown, Massachusetts, that's an adult use and medical marijuana dispensary, and that is currently under build-out. And we would like to make a dispensary in Abington, close to where most of our roots are. Most of the team members are from the South Shore, Massachusetts area, and so this was one of the few towns that looked like a great opportunity to develop a long-term relationship with. We're looking to bring anywhere between 10 to 15 FTE jobs on site. We're looking at anticipated revenues of around 8 to 10 million. That's conservatively. And we're looking to really just be a good neighbor. Most of our other locations that we have, like Middleborough, we have done a lot of hiring locally of qualified people, and we're looking to do the same here. And most of our business now will be through pickup orders and curbside orders because of the pandemic, so that's what we're anticipating, a lot of the business being conducted on site, even though we have a smaller space area inside, but with the additional parking spaces and the current climate, I think we'll be very well suited to run that operation that way. So that's just a little overview of kind of who we are as a company, where we've been doing business in other places in Massachusetts. Like I said, we're a family-funded company, so we don't have a large investment corporation behind us. We really try to keep it a local business here. So that's all for me.
How many FTEs did you say?
Anywhere between 8 to 15.
Thank you.
Please, the board, I'll have Mr. Mirabito take the board through the site plan as it's been revised.
Could you put the plan down that way so everybody in the room could see it? Back a little further. That's fine, thank you.
This is our site plan, which has been revised from the first one you saw. What it shows is the outline of the existing property in yellow, shows the existing structure on the site, and it shows the proposed traffic pattern. There's a total of 19 spaces. This being the handicap space 1, goes around to space 19. These two spaces here and here would be for the occupants of the existing building. We show the traffic pattern to be two-way. There's a 24-foot opening here, which is what the DOT allows. It's also more than ample for the emergency vehicles to enter and exit. We also show a sidewalk up against the existing building for the people in the parking lot. They can cross from any space and get on the sidewalk and walk into the main entrance, which is in this area here. The access would be both from H. Elm Street, and they could also come in from Route 18 as well. There are some existing outbuildings. There's a swimming pool which would go, and the only remaining structure would be in this area here. It's fairly straightforward. We're proposing permeable pavement, which would allow the stormwater to enter into the pavement and infiltrate into the ground below it. It'd be treated, and it'll infiltrate into the ground as well. It's fairly straightforward. So I think with that, I'll end my presentation and answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. And so now if Ms. Almeida would display the renderings for the board.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pedro Almeida. I'm with EA Architects. And for the last time we were here, one of the main comments architecturally was how our main entrance was handled, which was basically using the public way. So we've now relocated that main entrance into the back parking lot, which will allow for easy, accessible entry point into the space. And basically come into our retail side, and then the back of the house where we have a secure vault, some storage, accessible bathroom. These are our proposed elevations. The left side of the building is to remain as is, and this is what we're proposing. Low slope roofs. It's a small space. And, I can take any questions.
So people would not enter off the Route 18 side of the building, they'd enter in the rear, correct?
Correct.
So currently, the building has windows along the Route 18 side of it, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So this front facade here is facing Route 18.
Okay.
The next one faces the public way, and this rear one faces the parking lot area.
Okay. I thought there were some windows along the street level where your building would be, your business would be as well. Is there currently? The only reason I'm asking is you're kind of shifting the whole entrance around to the build of the building, which is fine. It does rearrange your floor plan under the guidelines. Does the police department have to sign off on the floor plan and the safety plan where everything's located?
I don't believe that's the case, but we'll certainly adhere to anything the police commissioner asks us to take a look at.
If I may add, one of the concerns was having to build sidewalks and access way to the front entrance, which would have been through the public way.
Okay. Okay, I have other questions, but I'll wait for.
Okay, now we ask Mr. Kelly from the Nass Associates to discuss traffic. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. For the record, my name is Sean Kelly, the traffic engineer with the Nass Associates and half the traffic team. Thank you again for having us tonight. Well, I think what I'll do is just take a few minutes to walk you through our traffic study, how it was conducted, what our findings were, what our recommendations are, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions members of the board have. So we prepared a traffic assessment in accordance with state and DOT guidelines. First stage is we went out and took a look at existing traffic conditions as they exist today. We did some daily counts, peak hour counts on Route 18 to get a handle on the traffic flow. The corridor carries about 19,000 cars a day. Peak hour flows range anywhere from about 1,100 to about 1,350, 1,100 in the morning, 1,350 at night, and also on the weekends. We looked at crash data in the area. We wanted to determine whether there are any notable crash trends. We looked at the last 5 years, which is the state guideline. In the vicinity of the site, there were 3 crashes, which falls well below the state average. There were no discernible safety issues that we identified. We looked at vehicle speeds. It's a 35-mile-an-hour road. As you probably are aware, people travel a little faster than that. We found the 85th percentile speed was closer to 40, which is what we use for design purposes. Based on that speed, we looked at sight lines, both from the proposed access point as well as the existing side street, and they both meet the requirements to provide safe and efficient access to and from the site. We looked at the amount of traffic that this project would generate. The ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, publishes rates that tells you how many trips you can expect during certain times of the day based on the size of the facility. For a dispensary of this size, you're looking at about 20 trips in the morning peak hour, about 40 in the evening, and then the busiest time would be on a Saturday, about 60. So the total volume is about a car a minute during the busiest times.
60 trips an hour?
An hour, yep. So when you look at it in the context of what's out on Route 18 today, it's about a 2 to 5% increase beyond what's out there currently. We do understand there are improvements in place along Route 18 that ultimately are going to improve the corridor. It's going to go from a 2-lane corridor to a 4-lane corridor. Today there are no pedestrian accommodations. There's going to be sidewalk on both sides, improved pedestrian crossing with signalized locations, improved drainage, pavement marking, signage, things of that nature. As was noted, the driveway has been designed with a 24-foot cross-section, which is the DOT criteria for a commercial drive. So we're confident that this driveway will blend into what they're proposing out in the street itself. Since we looked at our first study, we have looked at the revised plan. We think it's a better plan. It's a cleaner plan. Instead of forcing a one-way flow where motorists may not be aware of where they enter and exit, now you can enter and exit from both sides, which gives you two-way flow around the building, both for customer traffic and also it's better for emergency vehicle access. Our recommendations are really focused on providing safe access, ensuring the sight lines are maintained, ensuring all the pavement markings and signage adheres to the appropriate NDTCD design criteria. This is on state highway, so they will have to get a highway access permit from DOT, so there will be another round review at the state level in terms of the geometry and traffic impacts and what have you. But again, we're confident that what's proposed now is what DOT is going to be looking for as part of that review. That's really all I have for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of the board might have relative to traffic. Thank you.
Perhaps at this point, Jeffrey, you could make some comments on the plan.
Absolutely. Again, Jeff Bandy, peer reviewer for the town, project manager with McMahon Associates. So in reference to the traffic assessment produced by Vanessa and Mr. Kelly just went over some of the highlights of the study. So we put together a comprehensive peer review of the material that were contained within the traffic assessment itself, along with the updated site plan that he mentioned in terms of, looking at the assessment and the site plan in terms of accessibility, safety, capacity, and things of that nature. So we did have a series of comments, and without being long-winded, I'll just go through them briefly. The original assessment mentioned that, the roadway into the site circulated as one way. So I just want to make sure that, again, the roadway was circulating as two-way as the site plan dictated, which is clearly shown here. In terms of existing conditions, we always like to assess whether the study area that they looked at, again, in terms of safety and capacity, was reasonable. Looking at nearby intersections to see if those should be included in the study area. We found no issues with what they chose for the site. Existing conditions study area, again, the roadway, Helm Street to the north, and then the site driveway itself. Again, just a clarification on some of the data that they collected. Again, as Mr. Kelly outlined, a lot of the travel speeds along the roadway are slightly higher than the existing speed limit of 35 miles an hour. So we just want to make sure the site distance calculations based on that existing speed and 85th percentile speed reflected the new site plan. I think the location of the new driveway is a little bit further south along Route 18. So we just wanted to make sure that those calculations were consistent with the updated site plan. And again, so what McMahon did was we did go out and visit the site ourselves just to confirm some of the existing conditions. Again, no secret that the existing roadway is under construction. So the main thing we wanted to make sure is that the existing site plan was going to tie in correctly with the future conditions along the roadway, making sure the curb radii and the curb width were going to be able to transition nicely to the new location of the sidewalk being constructed on the west side of the roadway. I think as the site plan shows right now, the curb shows tie into the existing curb line, which will be moved ahead in the future. So we just want to make sure that, again, those entry and exit radii match consistently with being able to access the site safely, especially in terms of the parking level. I know the proposed parking on site meets the town requirements for a number of spaces. Again, we just want to make sure that, if the curb line needed to be adjusted, inward towards the site, that the number of parking spaces on site would still meet that proposed number that's required by the town. We corroborated the trip generation numbers, excuse me, that Mr. Kelly mentioned in terms of the amount of vehicles that would be expected to be generated on a daily and peak hour basis during the morning, afternoon, and Saturday peak. Safety numbers as well. We just want to confirm that the safety in terms of the area that they use to perform that safety assessment, it being not a major intersection location, a lot of times it can be difficult to point out exactly where the crashes occurred. So we just wanted to make sure that those crashes were researched in front of where the actual site is. Knowing full well there's plenty of driveways for industrial and residential use along the corridor as well. Again, that was our the main crux of our review. And again, we just wanted to agree with the methodology to reach out to the Abington Police Department to monitor the site in terms of the customer demand. A lot of times sites like these will see an influx of customers when the store first begins. And a lot of times the amount of capacity for parking on site is unable to be achieved in that first, few months of opening. So whether that might require some sort of satellite parking or appointment scheduling or some sort of, parking or demand management in the first few months of opening, I think would be a good mitigation measure for this project. So I think, insofar as the traffic study mentioning that the coordination with the police department would be, part of the approval for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate those, and I think most of those concerns have been addressed. And my clients have been in this business for a while now, and they always work with the police department. That is true. I think historically, during the opening of these facilities, that there is a run of the traffic, and they'll certainly work with the department in private details to manage that. I'd also like to mention, since we were last here, I think there was an issue back in February about what was going to happen with the existing business that's there. That business will no longer be there. This will be the only business use. There'll be a residential use up above for the owner. There'll be 4 dedicated parking spaces for the residential use, 15 on site for my client's use, and then the additional 35 spaces at the adjacent facility where we've leased land. So absolutely, I think those are all things that we can work with from McMahon, and I think our client has addressed them. Thank you.
So you're saying that that'll be just vacant, this, the other business that was there?
Yeah, that will be vacant. It's no longer to be a business use for that owner, correct? It'll just be my client.
And that won't be used for anything, it'll just be a
Correct.
empty building?
Well, my client's going to be using the first floor. I'm sorry. The owner is right here. Can I have him address the board?
Yeah, the space I'm renting them, that's the space where I have my business. I already moved from there.
So I think when I wasn't here, so maybe I misunderstood, but I understood the issue came up whether or not that business would cease. That business will cease. It'll just be my client with its commercial use.
So he'll be using the whole building?
Yeah, except there'll be a residential apartment above.
On the third floor?
Yes.
Not second floor?
I apologize for creating confusion.
I'm a little confused with that as well. This, the gray area portion of building not included, that's the period, that's going to remain empty?
It's a resident.
Can we just approach it?
Okay, this is the jacuzzi room. This is where we entered. I parked my car here. This is the residential. This was an old building, this much commercial area, and this was old commercial area on this side, the whole thing. This house was built in 1995 when they borrowed some money, the previous owner, and he built this small house here. Now what I'm doing, I'm renting a whole this space for business to them, and I have the house, and there is one small space, office space in the front, which I had a guest room when I bought the property. Later on, I was on 1035 Bedford Street. The plaza had a very small parking, so I moved my business there. But now all the business is online. I hardly get maybe 2 or 3 customers a week. So I decided to just shut it down and do it online.
Have we answered your question about that?
Okay, we have a letter from January 29th from Norwood Engineering. Is that the latest?
That's, yeah, we can call him if you want.
Okay, if we have. As requested, we have reviewed the site plan submission for the proposed recreational marijuana retail store located at 1410 Bedford Street, prepared by Ross Engineering Incorporated, dated December 18th, 2019. One sheet and supporting documents. Proposed is the siting of a recreational marijuana store in an existing building and developed site. A small addition is also proposed. The site is small and has primarily impervious cover with building and pavement. It is a corner lot with Bedford Street and Helm Street frontage. Helm Street is a marginally improved dead-end street used by abutters for storage and is noted as a public way on the plan. We visited the site on January 28, 2020 to observe the existing conditions. Zoning a special permit for the use is required in addition to site plan approval by the planning board. The site is the business development district as well as the marijuana retail overlay district. The lot is an existing non-conforming lot which does not comply with several of the dimensional and other requirements of the underlying business district. Therefore, we question whether the site meets the requirements of section 17524.3 F and 1A 2A. The zoning enforcement officer should be consulted for an opinion. Parking and circulations. Access to the site is off Helm Street. The proposed travel through the site is in a one-way direction and counterclockwise circulating pattern. However, that has been changed, as we just heard. The site also exists onto Bedford Street on the southern end of the site. It is unclear from the plan if the aisle and the intersection of Bedford Street will be striped or curbed. Currently, the entire frontage is wide open, paved, and uncurbed. Curbing should be provided along Bedford Street to limit access to only the defined entrance and exit points. And I'm sure that'll be done because the curbing's going in with the Route 18. 5 existing parking spaces are included in the table of parking provided. These spaces are non-conforming regarding the access aisle. I think that's been changed since Dave wrote this also. Within the layout of the state right-of-way. The use of these spaces require backing, and that's been eliminated, so we'll,
So they haven't seen the new plan?
I thought, we haven't got another letter since then?
No.
No.
So, the only thing, I did send Dave the plan, he apparently never got it. He's been working from home, and I sent it to the office. I did talk to him today, we can call him if you want. He was gonna look at the parking. That was his big concern, other than the zoning, which you guys all got the correspondence trail. I'm not sure if you got it once or twice, but, between town council and Marshall and the town manager, and I think her only concern would be to see the existing and proposed plans to make sure the nonconformity is remaining the same.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I think we addressed that in my letter of February 18, 2020, that the use is the same. I think under your bylaw, it allows for a continuation under 17369.
Wanted to make sure the physical buildings.
Right, and it is, it's not going to change, I'm sorry.
Footprint's not gonna change at all?
It is not.
Okay. That was her concern. So I can call Dave if you guys want to talk to him?
Sure.
Quick question. This part here, is this going to be new?
Yes, that. So it's delineated, so this section here is new, and this is the section of the new building that will be facing Route 18.
You rebuilt, you're staying within the existing footprint.
That is correct. We're tearing down two concrete slabs, and we're using the existing footprint to build new.
That's a detail I had missed. Okay. So the idea being that it's still going to be, the store itself is single story.
Correct.
But that's going to provide like a light into the...
Into the space, correct.
Okay. Did anyone else miss that, or was that just me? That they were tearing down that side of the building?
I think it missed me too, because I didn't see anything new on the footprint. I mean, on the plans.
Yeah.
It looks all new to me.
I thought they were just reciting it.
I don't know, well, it looks a lot, I mean, every time I look at the architecture, I go, that sure looks nicer than what I see out there.
Hey Dave, how you doing? Hold on, I'm gonna put you on speakerphone. Okay, you're on speakerphone.
Hey, David.
Okay, I'm here.
On your letter, Dave, we have the letter from January 29th, and obviously a few things have been changed, like there's two-way traffic instead of one-way traffic. And have you had a chance to look into that?
I looked at it basically this afternoon when Liz called me. I'm sitting at my computer now. Let me just bring up that drawing, if I can.
So
I'd like to make a comment. If he
Go
just
ahead,
looked at
Bob.
it this afternoon, he needs some time to review
Yeah,
that.
obviously, I'm sure, Dave, that you need time to review this, and we probably have to continue this to another hearing, or continuation of the hearing.
Yeah.
Right,
We had a lot of issues with the site at the last meeting.
right.
So
And
we
all-
need, Dave needs time to review this. There's no doubt in my mind.
And the other, I know the other thing is the parking layout's been changed also on the new plan, so it's not angular parking.
Yeah, it's been changed to perpendicular parking, which was one of the comments we made, that it should be perpendicular because the angled parking didn't work when you actually put a car in the parking spots opposite each other. They didn't leave any room for cars to pass through the travel aisle. So they did change that, which was a good change. I'm not sure.
I think they still had, I still think they were proposing one-way traffic. The plan I have shows one-way traffic circulation counterclockwise coming in from the side street. They show single arrows. It's not a two-way parking lot.
Yeah, Dave, they've changed it so that it is two-way circulation, both coming in on Helm Street and also on Route 18.
Okay. Did the traffic study address that in terms of a concern for making a left-hand turn into the site across Route 18?
Jeff?
Did they evaluate that as a potential issue?
No, not given the, thank you, not given the, and I don't know if this is the proper way to respond.
That's
right. You know, given the new, you know, 4-lane cross-section on Route 18, you know, we didn't see any issue with that, particularly looking at the traffic volumes and the amount of peak vehicle trips that'll be generated at the site. We didn't foresee that being an issue.
Did you hear that?
No, it's really too far away.
And there's a lot of plexiglass between all of us, too.
Yeah,
Summarize it.
yeah. Perhaps Jeffrey could get in touch with you and just go over it with you between now and our next meeting.
Sure, no problem.
No, be happy to.
All right. And
Yeah, the plan I have, I guess, is an earlier plan and was filed with Liz, and they have a one-way circulation going up to Route 18 in a counterclockwise direction. The parking seems to be laid out okay. More than enough space given the perpendicular parking. And my only concern at this point would be some indication from the traffic engineers whether or not a left-hand turn in that location into the site is acceptable from a traffic safety point of view. I can look at the other comments that I had, but that was that and the comment that I had on zoning and non-conforming dimensions. That, I guess, based upon my discussion with Liz on this afternoon, was addressed by the building inspector and town council. But that and the parking layout were my two biggest concerns, along with pedestrian access to the building. And the plan I'm looking at now shows, if I'm correct in reading it, now shows a sidewalk going to an entrance in the rear of the building. Is that
yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that comment has been addressed. There are a couple other items that I had mentioned. I looked at the report this afternoon, and I guess in terms of drainage, my only comment was that there's no drainage on the site now. They've reduced the impervious, and they were proposing pervious pavement over a portion of the site to address infiltration. My comment was to pave the entire site, not just half the site, with pervious pavement to address runoff on the site, to improve runoff on the site. I think that those are my main concerns.
I know in your original letter you wanted curb stops.
Yeah, but that is not relevant anymore because they don't have any parking really up against the building. All the parking is around the perimeter of the site, with the exception of 2 spaces on my plan. They're numbered 18 and 19, but there's adequate space between the parking stall and the building. Previous, when they had the angle parking, the front of the cars were right up against the building, as I remember it. But they've moved all the parking away from the building, and they have the sidewalk running along the face of the building. So the curb stop issue is really not appropriate or anymore.
In addition to that, Dave, they've said that they've got lease space of 35 spaces leased from across the street from the Whitman Auto or whoever owns that, which certainly is one of the problems there. I don't know what the length of the lease is or what happens after the lease is up or what goes on there, but that's...
Yeah. Where is that located? Across the side street, Elm Street?
I presume...
Across Route 18?
I presume that's where the used car dealership is?
It is, Whitman Auto.
That's where the, did you hear that?
Across Elm Street.
Yeah, it's across that where the used car sales are.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have the zoning bylaw in front of me, but I think there's a section in there about parking off-site. Most zoning bylaws have it. I can't remember if it's in Abington's, but there is a provision for off-site leasing the space. And I think there are conditions in there that, if it's in there, have conditions that apply to off-site leasing in terms of tenure of the lease and so forth, and providing evidence that they have a long-term lease.
And also the print...
I'm not sure about that. That's something that the applicant really needs to address.
And also the print shop that's there will not be there, and there'll be only one business on the first floor, which will be the marijuana store, and they will continue to have the apartments on the second floor.
Okay.
And
If that's allowed by zoning, then that's okay. There seems to be adequate parking on the site based upon their calculations.
the loading space, is that a serious problem?
It's not addressed.
Right.
It's one of the issues that we raised in the review that I can't remember back to February or January when I reviewed this, but I recollect that the loading space was heading in towards the back of the building, and it was unclear if there was a loading space. On the plan that I think is currently in front of you, there is no loading space shown, and there should be some provision for loading during business hours, as opposed to all off business hours. There should be some provision for loading during business hours.
And on the curving on Route 18, on the new, with Route 18 being constructed, there is curbing and sidewalk, so that would be done by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Right. The other issue was, and I don't have those plans in front of me, I think you guys do, was landscaping and signage. I think signage is a critical thing here, given what the use is and the anticipated influx initially for this use, that there should be clear signage for how to enter and exit this site. And I guess that relates to whether or not this parking lot is going to be one-way or two-way. If it's going to be one-way, then their plan should really be showing signage coming out onto Route 18 with, do not enter type signs, and there should be some type of sign in front of the business indicating they enter the site from the side street. If it's going to be two-way, there should be some signage as well that clearly indicates the traffic flow through the site. And I don't believe, at least the plan I'm looking at, doesn't have any indication of advertising signs for the business or signage for traffic flow. So that's something that needs to be added to the plan. The loading space should be added to the plan. I don't think there was any landscaping, at least what I had, and lighting for this plan. But, so those are the things I think that are remaining.
They do have a plan, they have presented a plan for the signage, and it's on two post or bluestone caps, and it's just concrete masonry units with stone veneer. But obviously, you can see that, and also, I think on the reports, it mentions that make sure that it doesn't interfere with the sight lines on Route 18.
Yes, the signage for the main building should be placed so that it doesn't interfere with turning in and out of that site. Let me look at the,
And you have a copy, Mr. Sullivan, of his letter, engineering of that, right?
I do, Mr. Chair, and we submitted the plan that's before you in March that was direct response to that. We did include a landscape plan, a lighting plan, and other materials, and I understand that perhaps the representative from Norwood hasn't had an opportunity to look at that. These have been sort of unusual times, but I think it's our position we've responded to all of that. With respect to deliveries, they do happen around back at non-peak hours, and so there won't be any difficulty. And I'm wondering if maybe it makes sense, I'm not sure if this board would permit it, to have Mr. Mirabito, our project engineer, perhaps work directly with Norwood Engineering to point out, since he isn't here, exactly how he's addressed those concerns. We submitted this in March. I know there's been a pandemic. My people have sort of been at this a long time, and so they'd like to sort of see if they can create some momentum here. I think traffic we've addressed, and I think also most of the things that are being brought up are also addressed by us. Maybe there are a couple that could be addressed so that we don't waste a lot of time.
Yeah, I have no problem with the two of you, going back and forth with this. I think we probably need to continue the hearing until the next meeting.
When would the next hearing be?
Good question.
Everybody all set with Dave?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
anything
very,
else? No.
very much. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you in the next day or two.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So
Can I see your calendar?
the next planning board meeting originally was scheduled for the 14th of September. The first Monday of the month is the 7th, which is Labor Day. So it would be the 14th of September.
Mr. Chair, would there be any possibility of closing the hearing contingent upon Mr. Mirabito resolving these issues with the town engineer?
I don't think we should close the hearing. I see some shaking heads over there, so.
My comment on it is that, this is a totally different site plan. I expected to see the last site plan. I didn't know how you could possibly fix that last site plan, but this is, this looks very good. I only have a couple of questions about the entrances, but I can't imagine Dave running into a lot in here, especially with no drainage.
I think as far as I'm concerned, they've answered a few things tonight, and I just saw the plans the other, when we got them in the mail, so.
I'm open to meeting again at the end of the month, not necessarily waiting until September if people's schedules allow, but I couldn't
Well, the
vote
month
to-
is September, yeah.
I couldn't vote to close it right now.
Right.
I wouldn't want to impose on the board's time, but I think if Mr. Mirabito could speak directly with Norwood, this could be a very quick meeting.
Well, part of the problem, unfortunately, was he did speak, he sent stuff directly to Dave without going through the planning office, and Dave didn't look at it.
I'm sorry, who spoke directly to him?
Mr. Mirabito emailed something directly to Dave, like a sketch plan or something, And Dave said he didn't even look at it because it didn't come out of this office.
But we did submit these plans
I
in
did,
March.
and I did send them to him, and
Yeah.
they went to his office, and he's not there. So I don't know why he didn't receive them, but they did go to him, because I was working from the office and from home as well.
But I would assume if the chair told him he could deal directly with Mr. Mirabito, that would obviate that problem.
But then the board wouldn't have copies of that
Oh,
plan.
we'll make sure everything goes to the board, too.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing to do. When you submit something to Dave, submit it to Liz at the planning board at the same time. That would be helpful.
Unfortunately, he's not the keeper of the record, I am. So my feet are held to the open meeting law fire and the records fire, so that's all that's about. Believe me, if I didn't have
We
10
understand.
filing cabinets in my office,
We fully understand what towns are going
and I
through.
did send it to him, so I apologize that I didn't see a letter from him today, and that's when I called him, but
I wouldn't object if you guys aren't finished with your presentation to continue that now without, obviously Dave's got to have time to look at the plan. If you have more to add now, I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with what Rick said if you want to have another meeting.
So what we would be doing is just, we're ending the presentation, and then what would the board do? Vote on the next meeting? Is that what we're talking about?
It'd be the 14th, we'd have the
Could be
next.
as long, I mean, I don't see a problem with them, with the site plan with Dave. I want Dave's blessing and all.
Right.
But I don't see there being any major hurdles.
I don't see, you know, other than, can I ask you a question? Is that line on the street, Mr. Garavito, where it says gutter line, is that the proposed, the one it's going to be along Route 18? It shows a radius coming out to the gutter line here. Is that gutter line what's there today, or is that?
That's proposed.
Okay, that would be one thing.
That doesn't exist.
I don't know if that goes on my
And the other one would be traveling over the gravel off of Helton Street?
It's existing.
Yeah, they have that one too.
Some of that's paved, kind of 18th Street, it's paved from 19. There's a small section there that we paved.
So I know those would be the two things, and like the things you mentioned that would catch you as to, for us, you'd be asking us, how are we dealing with this, and making sure that line is going to be built.
Yeah, that geometry meets DOT requirements.
Okay.
And we have to apply for that process.
All right. Can we clarify a couple things before we move on? Looking at the parking sketch, well, anything really regarding the Route 18 expansion, can you please point out where the future curb line is going to be when everything is all done?
The future curb line?
Because there's a line here that says State Highway Alteration Layout.
That's the proposed layout line.
Yep.
And then the edge of the pavement is further to your right.
Oh, do you want to show on the plan so everybody can see?
So that should say proposed gutter line.
Yes, that second line is the new layout line, it's about a 2-foot taking.
That's the question, yeah.
Then the edge of the pavement is out.
Yeah, it'd be better if you use that over there and,
Yes, so the proposed line off the highway.
This line here is the new layout line, the proposed layout line. This is the old one. And the proposed gutter line is out here. So what we'll do is we'll bring it out and we'll match the gutter line here. This is vertical granite curbing on the proposed state plan, and from here down, what we'll do is to bring the curbing out and match what the state's putting in on the existing gutter line out there.
So where will the sidewalk, because they're building a sidewalk, correct? Does that abut directly against the building?
I'm not sure where the sidewalk is. I mean, the sidewalk would be somewhere between here and the building. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of room within the layout for a sidewalk.
Okay.
sidewalk would be in the Commonwealth of Mass DOT.
Yeah, it'd be within the layout line. It'd be somewhere between here and the edge of the pavement.
Okay.
All that parking out in front's been eliminated, as you know.
So many problems that we had with the plan, they've corrected all. the walking around to the entrance, moving the entrance to the back, having enough room to back up out of the back of the car, the two-way traffic. I don't see, the only objections I had with the whole plan at all wasn't the business or anything else there, was just that the parking lot didn't work.
Parking lot was the huge issue last time.
Yeah, Dave likes this parking now as compared to what it was, according to what we just was on the phone.
Jeff was asking about Elm Street and how that's gonna be approached. Now, does the property own that portion of Elm Street? Because it's a private way, correct? We determined?
This is the property line, from here to here is the layout line. Elm Street has a layout with the 50 feet, from here to the yellow line is 50 feet.
Yep.
There is some existing paving. This is the edge of the pavement in Elm Street now, and what we're proposing to do.
But is it a public way or is it a private way?
It is a public way, it's recognized by the town
Okay.
in this list.
So currently, part of the building sits on the public way?
It does.
Okay.
It's a public way owned by the abutters.
It's a what?
Public way owned by the abutters.
Okay, so it's not a town road?
No.
Okay. Do you own that, so is that part of the building that's hanging into the way coming down? Is that gonna be eliminated, or is that gonna be rebuilt too?
That is the existing footprint that's remaining, being part of a non-conforming.
Right, so the new structure that's being built will still jut out into the public way?
We're holding the footprint, we're not changing, it's a non-conforming structure.
Okay.
And
So-
we're not changing it.
So my concern is that with a lot more vehicles coming off 18 into that area, it's very wide, there's no curbs, there's no, anything.
I would think, Rick, that when the highway's put in there, they must be putting a curb in there. I can't imagine that they're not. I'd have to look at the plans from
No, the curve is, they already made the curve on both sides.
Okay.
And the curve comes after this area right here, which is a little bit bricks on here. This is the building.
Yeah,
It's 5 foot from the building, and then the curve is over this thing. And then it comes all the way till here.
Yep, especially if that's gonna be a two-way entrance exit right there. There's no lines in the road, there's no fog lines, people aren't gonna know where they're supposed to be in the roadway. You have a building jutting out 5 feet into the public way. I'd like to delineate that area somehow, because otherwise how are cars gonna know what side of the road?
No, there was a line in the middle. Now they just working on it. They make the curve, so we're gonna make again.
But does it go all the way to where the entrance is?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I'd like to see that on the plan, whatever the roadways.
It's a paper road, so we paved it ourselves.
Technically, you own half of it.
Yeah, so, you can tell this is for outgoing and this is incoming from this side.
So are there any traffic control needs for an area like that? As they gotta turn into this privately owned public way that has no markings, no curbs, no sidewalks.
I would suggest that you look into what Commonwealth is doing on that road, so that you'll have it in your plan, so that Rick can see it, and so can Dave Johnson.
And I was asking the traffic engineer too if he had any
I'll
concerns.
step in if I would. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The state, obviously it's under construction, so the state has, plan specs and estimate plans for this section of roadway already. So you could contact the District 5 engineer and you'd be able to obtain those plans and superimpose that on the, proposed curb line, and be able to, summarize exactly what you're saying, like what sort of treatment are they gonna have at that section? Is it gonna be curb? Is it gonna be berm? What sort of?
No, round the glass.
Oh, okay. Okay, here is the picture, sorry. This is for from the walking path.
Yep.
They are making, and that has a curve right in the, and I took the picture of it. This is the entrance.
Okay.
And exit from the main road.
Okay.
Make the curve. And this one is. Right here. Here is the curve. They made the curve for that road. And then there is maybe line in the middle, so Traffic knows which way is in and which way
Okay.
is out.
I still think it would be good to have it on the plan.
Just have Mr. Maravito address one thing.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We can find out what the state is going to do within that 50-foot layout as far as access from the existing pavement in the street to the layout line, and from there, we can, this line here represents the edge of the existing pavement in H. Elm Street. What we could do is to find out where the state is gonna provide an opening in this area here, and then what I'd suggest we do is to come in here and maybe straighten this out and put maybe a Cape Cod berm in there to delineate the edge of the pavement, so people coming in have a better sense of where they're going.
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
And what I do is to come in from wherever this entrance comes in, I pave it, I put in a Cape Cod berm, and just bring it into here. So the vehicles coming in would have that.
And the other thing is, it might be worthwhile to have some kind of a center line put in there, so that when someone's coming in, they're just not gonna cut across the road. In other words, when they come in off Route 18, that they really know that they should be on the other side of the yellow line, and then have it open so they can take the left-hand turn into the parking lot.
Because if they're coming south on 18, they're gonna come flying over.
Please?
If they're coming south on Route 18, they're gonna come flying there right onto that property, and, you know,
That's why
there's.
I'm suggesting that
Yeah.
you have a yellow line on that road, and then have it open so you can come in to the parking area.
And just to clarify, the parking area is not going to be paved, it's going to be a permeable.
It's a
Dave-
permeable pavement, yes. Or it does is to collect the water, and it'll treat it, and then it's.
Dave made a comment on the phone, however, when he was on the phone, you might not have heard him, but that it would be better if it was blacktopped and drainage or something. But you two can work together on that, with Dave Johnson.
Because one of my concerns was the lot coverage, because, you know, we have a standard of 60%, this is 90, 85.
So they'll have to get a waiver on that.
In addition, is this a type that gets kicked up with cars backing up and as they're starting? Okay. I will ask as a condition that they have to keep the parking lot neat, that they don't allow ruts, grooves, potholes to form, that it stays flat and pretty.
I don't know about that condition. Kind of like, I don't know how you can I don't know how you can enforce that condition.
It's perfect, it's paved.
I think you've got something to work with Dave and everything else, and did you have anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Sullivan?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Anything you wanted to add?
No, we will have Mr. Maravito contact Norwood directly, and we'll keep the administrator involved in the loop so that the open meeting law is not violated, and try to address all those concerns. And we'll reach out to DET to figure out what's going on there and how we can address the board's concerns relative to Helm Street.
All right, and what we'll do is we'll have a motion to continue the hearing to the 14th of September.
Motion.
Motion made. Have a motion made to continue the hearing to September 14th. Have a seconded? Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of continuing the hearing to the 14th of September, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
You'll be in touch with Dave, right?
Yeah, was not aware of any letter or comments or anything like that from the
I'll
civil
send you
engineer.
the Norwood engineering letter with his contact information.
Okay.
With his email, so you can, and then I'll have him reach out to you. I think you've addressed his concerns.
Okay.
Because he said that to me this afternoon, as long as you guys were.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It didn't seem like he had the latest plan in front of him, so I can take a look at the, comments. And
pavement, right?
if they're relative to the old plan, then we can just say that those have been addressed. And if they're relative to the new plan, we can just say you know,
Stuff gets
every,
kicked up.
this item has been properly.
You have to plow it.
addressed.
Gonna be
Sounds
dips and
good.
ruts
All right, thank you.
and potholes.
I've never seen it,
Guys
so
have a
I
Form
can't
A?
answer your question.
For that?
I know there's all types of
Nobody's here for that.
ways to
No,
do
but,
it.
you can vote on it and sign it. I think, yeah.
It's too
Right.
bad because
We
could
have
have
a-
made some headway on that if he had a chance to review it.
We have a Form A on, it's on 139 as you go into Holbrook. It's
Can I pass that down?
on Randolph Street. It's
Frank
the-
Mackey's old land.
Frank Makowitz, the landscaper that leased a number of years ago.
Can you guys throw one? Oh, wait a minute, no, here, I got another one. I got a Mylar. Oh, we don't have one.
Is this,
This is
know
on
where the cemetery is?
139.
is this all one lot at present?
Probably is.
And they're subdividing it like this, I guess is my question.
Very quiet.
I wish Carl was here to explain it.
So he said that James and Christina McMahon,
Yep, it's his daughter.
yep, so that little like L-shaped, not little, the 10.5 acres,
Yep,
is gonna stay with them for their lot, and then there's the cemetery, and then they're just creating Lot A.
that's where the old
That's it. I think
greenhouse
that's
and stuff
where the old
was.
greenhouse was,
Oh,
yeah.
no, that's way over. All right, I get it. That's way over.
Yep.
That's where he used to have his garden in the irrigation pond. All
Yeah.
right, I get it now.
And had the flower stand out front.
Yep. Yeah, but that's over even farther. The entrance there, that's over this way even more.
Yeah,
What did that used to be?
Which,
he was a landscaper. so
yeah,
he
he used to run his business
He
in
had his
there.
own garden there and his equipment.
He was like a tree warden in Abington.
He was, yep, he was the tree warden.
That's where Feeney Brothers should go. It's here.
Yep.
If you grew up in the town, you know who it was. That's all.
So it appears they're just creating Lot A.
Hundred and 10 feet.
What you can do with it.
I mean, that could be a house lot probably,
So why do they
right?
split it if they can't build on the rest of it?
Because the daughter,
Oh, you just said that.
Christina McMahon, lives there, yeah.
Gonna say, you could always put a subdivision in there at some point. Apparently, they're not going to. My grandmother and grandfather are actually buried in that cemetery, my uncle.
They're looking for the town to take it over.
Huh?
They're looking for the town to take it over.
Yeah, it's been in disarray for a long time. There was one guy that I think he volunteered and did it himself to go in there and mow it. And I don't think there's any lots left in the lots are so screwed up you couldn't tell anyways. Where did Wayne go?
He just left.
Huh?
He just left.
He just left? Yeah, I don't know. Can't say I blame him.
Oh, he's back.
Oh.
Gonna heat up someday. Oh, man, frozen. On the plans, and I've seen it. Any questions on the plan?
Nope. Appears to just create Lot A.
Yeah. Sorry.
Someone want to make a motion?
Approval not required?
Motion made. Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
While you're signing them, I think I gave you all a copy of the opinion from town council to set up a stormwater management revolving fund. That was brought up at the last meeting on how we were gonna maintain detention basins moving forward.
Say that again?
I think in your packets, I gave you the opinion from town council
Yep.
on setting up a stormwater management fund.
Oh.
At the last meeting we had, there was some concern about how detention basins were gonna be maintained moving into the future.
How would it be funded? Any ideas?
I don't remember that far back, yeah.
I think the idea was to, when we do subdivisions, so the developer could put money into it
We've talked
for
about
future
this.
maintenance.
We've talked about this on and off, and the problem with it is that someone builds a detention area, and the town hasn't got money to maintain it. And probably what we need to do is to charge a developer a certain amount of money and just put into a revolving fund. I don't know what that figure is, but it should be somewhat substantial, whether it's, I don't know how often it has to be maintained, but if the money was put in, a trust fund type situation, where the town, and I'm not even sure how this works, so the town would invest the money and get a return on it, and that interest return would pay for the maintenance. Because I'm sure every, maybe 5 years, they need to go in and do something. And if it was, you pick the figure and figure out a 5% return on the money, at least some money would be available.
How do you feel about the cemetery?
Please?
I know you're on the board with the cemetery. That's how you maintain it, right?
Let me tell you, how you maintain the cemetery? The towns take it over because you go bankrupt. And that's the problem, which the cemetery in Abington doesn't do, because we've tried to keep this thing going and get some financial responsibility.
But yes,
But
to answer your
the next thing that
question,
happens is when the cemetery can't be maintained any longer, or it's bankrupt, the city or the town ends up taking it over after 2 years. And the town maintains it for the eternity. That doesn't answer your question, but that's what happens.
and yes, that's basically how we run the cemetery with, we invest the money.
And in this case, is a developer comes in, builds a detention area or a retention area, and it gets out of hand, and then they need to be repaired, and the town has to go in and do it because no one else is gonna do it. The water starts backing up into people's property, and then I guess the town goes in there.
I would think the cost would be based on the square foot of the.
I think there's one
Yes.
bottom
On
that
this
you
one.
didn't sign. But I got them all kinda like that,
Huge basins, huge,
in the sum that they didn't sign, so I think it's the last one they didn't sign.
And what happens a lot of times, Jeff, is it starts coming up into growth, and there is a problem on wetlands and everything else, what you can maintain and what you can't maintain. That's
Check
another
them,
whole
Jeff,
issue.
see which ones you didn't sign, or
Do we have a list of all of the retention basins we've approved over the last 20 years? Would we be able to pull that together? DPW, someone building? No? All right.
No.
I think eventually that's something that's gonna have to happen though, right? Part of that process?
As part of the stormwater management
Yeah,
bylaw.
yeah.
You know, Abington is a complete streets community. I wonder if it's part of that plan that there's an inventory for the catch basins. I can check into that.
Well,
DPW has catch basins, but not retention basins.
No.
Right.
Or detention basins, or the hybrids.
Big overgrown trees and stuff on it.
Yes.
Oh, there's some you can't even tell. They're, you go into Mount Laurel and look to the right, there's a huge one there that you can't tell anymore because it's all trees. And that's not, I'm sure not the only one.
well,
Or do you,
I think it's something we need to,
is it something that you could put in as a covenant on a subdivision that the
I
residents
think-
have to maintain it?
you know, what I'd like to do, Liz, is if we could send a letter to get approval, have town council give us some kind of a, what we could do on that.
They did, they said you have to set it up at town meeting, and it's usually a fee from the developers.
Okay, so that's what we need to do and determine what that is. Well, can we put that on the agenda for next month?
I will certainly do that.
Thank you. Is there anything else further to come before the business?
At our next meeting or at a future meeting, I'd like to discuss the New England Art Building, that project.
What would you like to discuss about it?
Get an update because.
Want to have Sean Riley come in and make a report on it? Is
Yeah.
that what you'd like?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know that Sean's representing them anymore.
Oh, is that right? Well, could we send a letter to the owner and ask them to give us an update on
How
what?
about I send an email to the town manager, and he can ask the police and fire and building department?
Okay,
Is that okay?
it works for me.
Okay.
All right with you, Jeff? Did we sign all the plans?
I think we did. I don't know if you did, but I think
I didn't
us
sign all
did.
those.
There's been no substantial work up there for over a year.
Is there anything else to come before the meeting?
No.
Motion to adjourn, in order?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
See you tomorrow.